Otaku in the Marvel DC Universe. Greetings, fellow multiversal adventurers. It's an honor to have you back in this saga that has us all hooked. Official channel statement: this story is 100% epic fiction, so please don't attempt real magic. The results aren't guaranteed and insurance won't cover it. The rights to this masterpiece belong entirely to its brilliant original author. We are just a barge sharing it with you. Do you want to keep being part of this amazing community? Join our ninja army of subscribers on YouTube and give this content a like. And for true fans, our Patreon has exclusive ninjutsu waiting for you. Chapter 376: The Eye of Truth. On the way back to Konoha, Liang Yue strolled along, lost in thought as he recalled the upcoming plot developments. Little King Kong in his arms, however, couldn't stay put. With a few quick scrambles, it scurried from his chest to his shoulder, one hand holding onto his ear, the other shielding its eyes. As it looked around, it would occasionally bare its teeth and squeak, appearing restless and agitated. However, Liang Yue was used to this and slowly soothed it through their mental connection. At the same time, he flipped his hand, retrieving a large pitaya from the stronghold world. He had only just peeled back a section of the fruit skin when little King Kong bit into it. Instantly, juice splattered everywhere, and a faint, pleasant fragrance and sweetness began to spread around. Clearly, this was no ordinary fruit. Although its appearance was no different from a pitaya, in reality, its juice and flesh contained a significant amount of vitality. This was a fruit from a special low-magic game world, which could be eaten directly or made into various culinary products to replenish health points. The reason Liang Yue took out this fruit at this time was naturally because, after the previous battle and the successive slaying of the six-pathed puppets, his Wind Phantom Dragon's growth panel had accumulated enough experience points, as a special product of the Don't Starve game world system, even after undergoing system modifications, if he wanted to successfully level up. He still had to follow some of the game's characteristic opportunities. Eating pitaya to level up was a setting exclusive to the Wind Phantom Dragon. Finally reached level 5. It is said that Rachel and Nana both comprehended a skill called Eye of Truth after reaching this stage. I wonder if this talent ability originating from the Western fantasy dragons will produce any other reactions. With the Hyuga Byakugan handing the fruit in his hand to little King Kong, Liang Yue then took out another one. Looking at the fresh and tender flesh in front of him, Liang Yue opened his mouth wide. Crunch, crunch. In a few moments, he stuffed it into his mouth. His eating manner was almost no different from little King Kong's. Swish, in an instant, a golden radiance suddenly rose from Liang Yue's body, swirling and spreading around. Immediately afterward, a long-lost system notification sound rang in his mind. Ding. Comprehended skill Eye of Truth through the Wind Phantom Dragon template. Eye of Truth skill level 6. Current level 1/6. An instinctive physiological talent of the dragon species, which, when activated, will bring you, as a human, a different perspective. Skill effect: night vision, passive; telescopic vision, passive; wide angle, passive. This skill will automatically level up as the level increases. Wide angle, just these 3 passives? It looks much worse than a Byakugan. I wonder what new effects will emerge after leveling up. I'll go communicate with Nana and the others later. However, this skill automatically leveling up is quite good. It seems that it can be improved every 5 levels. Just like that, casually throwing the fruit peel into the bushes beside him, Liang Yue returned to Konoha with little King Kong after a while. However, just as he was leisurely making his way back, and had just arrived at the entrance of the Hyuga clan, a Konoha Anbu ninja wearing a mask happened to bring the Hokage's order, summoning him over. How is it? Looking at your expressions, the situation doesn't seem optimistic. Arriving at the window of the Hokage's office with a flying thunder god technique, looking at Tsunade, the third Hokage, Jiraiya, Kakashi, Naruto, and others in the room, all with solemn expressions, Liang Yue immediately guessed the outcome of the matter. This should be a bit of making a move, right? I heard that during your mission at the Fire Temple last time, you fought a masked man belonging to the Akatsuki organization. I now want to hear a more detailed account of your battle. After he flipped through the window and sat down, Tsunade frowned and said to him. Hearing this, Liang Yue didn't hide anything. Anyway, after completing the previous Fire Temple mission, he had already explained everything on the mission scroll. Repeating it now wouldn't make much of a difference anyway. Other than describing the process in more detail, it was impossible for Liang Yue to say anything new. After all, he couldn't directly reveal Obito's identity, could he? Wouldn't that expose everything? Liang Yue could only try his best to lean the information and deduction towards Brother Earth, but whether the few people present could guess the other party's identity along his train of thought was not his problem. In short, this person's ability is very strange, but even as a member of the Uchiha clan, If one wanted to give birth to such an ability, the other party must already be a master who has awakened the main Gekyo Sharingan. Moreover, according to past intelligence, the other party should have left Konoha village a long time ago. At least they should be older than Itachi and Shisu based on the existing information that Konoha has. Liang Yue stopped there. Hearing this, the third Hokage beside him also nodded subconsciously, put the mouthpiece of his pipe to his mouth and took a puff, and then opened his mouth with a solemn expression. Chunkyu's deduction should be correct. This Uchiha should be a master who was born before Itachi and Shisu, and left Konoha a long time ago. Otherwise, the Uchiha's extermination knight Alice Kakashi. Do you have anything to say? Jiraiya, who was sitting unceremoniously on the other side, accidentally discovered Kakashi, who had an uncertain expression, excited, and no longer had his usual calm dead fish eyes, so he couldn't help but ask. As soon as these words came out, everyone in the room focused their attention on him. I feel that person's ability is a bit familiar. Kakashi took a deep breath at this time, and said with some sadness in his eyes, what do you mean? Explain it more clearly. Tsunade crossed her arms at this time, looking at the other party, and asked, what I mean is that the other person's Sharingan ability is somewhat similar to my Sharingan. Both can transfer something to an unknown place. The difference is that my Sharingan can transfer various ninjutsu in addition to items, while that person can use it to transfer himself, but these seem to be applications of the same ability. After speaking, Kakashi unconsciously clenched his fists tightly, his chest rising and falling sharply. Then, to everyone's surprise, astonishment, and gaze, he slowly raised his forward protector, revealing the three-tomo Sharingan. After a burst of rotation, the three-tomo transformed into a main Gekyo. Immediately afterward, within Kakashi's line of sight, a distorted vortex suddenly appeared out of thin air, and a teacup placed on the Hokage's desk was sucked into this vortex in the blink of an eye. Chapter 377 Speculations about Shinwei. In short, after a series of deductions that weren't too convoluted, the Leaf Village elites and leaders in the Hokage's office had roughly determined the identity of the masked man in the Akatsuki organization. The reality was cruel. Despite being a former close comrade, a steadfast inheritor of the will of fire, and even someone who once frequently mentioned becoming Hokage as a catchphrase, Obito, long ago, had been formally revered along with many senior and junior ninjas as one of the glorious martyrs who unfortunately sacrificed themselves for the prosperity and peace of Konoha. But the current situation forced them to overturn this conclusion with their own hands. Therefore, Kakashi was currently lost and grieved in the eyes of multiple observers in the room. Kakashi might have fallen into severe self-doubt, temporarily losing the precise decision-making and judgment of a ninja. So, for a time, while the third Hokage, Tsunade, Jiraiya, Kahoru Udatane, and others began to analyze the newly acquired information about Obito's space-time abilities from multiple angles and construct countermeasures, Kakashi remained silent, his hands tightly gripping his pockets, his eyes vacant, and his thoughts wandering elsewhere. Seeing this, Naruto, as his student, seemed to want to offer some comfort, but for a moment, he didn't know how to start. On the other hand, Liang Yue, although he hadn't directly asked about the situation and outcome of the confrontation between the group and Nagato Uzumaki after entering the room, it didn't prevent him from making his own judgments through the conversations of the people present. It seems Nagato is dead, killed by Obito's sneak attack. It seems that, compared to the original story, Obito is now much more wary of Konoha's strength. Otherwise, he wouldn't have acted so hastily. Also, although Konan has successfully escaped with Nagato's body, she will inevitably seek revenge on Obito afterward, just like in the original storyline. That spendthrift woman. Speaking of which, judging from the current situation, the following plot shouldn't deviate too much, right? After all, although the process is a bit tortuous and the timeline is slightly advanced, the Rinnegan has indeed been obtained by Obito, just like in the original story, so the Ninja World War should be next. As for the Impure World reincarnation, however, this doesn't seem to prevent him from being resurrected again. From a fundamental perspective, the person most likely to trigger this event should be Orochimaru. Chunkyu, you are the only one among us who has fought Obito, so do you have any supplementary information or combat strategies regarding him? The third Hokage looked over with a deep expression and asked. I have fought him twice. The first time was during the mission at the Fire Temple, and the battle process has detailed records. The second time was just before when I was confronting Pain Tendo's Shinra Tensei. He suddenly appeared and attacked from behind, but he was still killed by me. Saying this, Liang Yue paused and looked at the listeners in front of him who had focused their attention on him, and then continued. Being killed twice, yet still being able to resurrect, so the opponent obviously used the Uchiha clan's forbidden technique Izanagi. And to use this secret technique, the price is to sacrifice a Sharingan, but Obito's main Gekyo Sharingan, which has awakened space-time abilities, is too precious to be used as a consumable. Therefore, the opponent should still have some finished Sharingan stored, so if you want to eliminate the opponent, the first thing to do is to eliminate these consumables. This is a bit troublesome. Obito's space-time ninjutsu is indeed very difficult to deal with. Simply relying on killing the opponent to consume all his stored Sharingan is not easy. Saying this, Jiraiya touched his chin, a much younger-looking old face showing a bit of contemplation, and then continued, moreover, I think there should be quite a few Sharingan hidden by the opponent. After the Uchiha massacre that year, a considerable number of Sharingan did disappear. It seems that this matter, besides Danzo, the opponent also participated. Saying this, the third Hokage's expression became increasingly ugly, and finally completely gloomy. Obviously, this old fellow also realized that the matter was very, means thorny or troublesome. Think about it, facing space-time abilities of the level of Kamui, it's not enough to just defeat and kill the opponent, you also have to accompany Obito and exhaust his backup health bars one by one. If something goes wrong in the middle, their side will suffer real losses. So, to eliminate that guy's Sharingan consumables, so that he can't use as energy, the most practical way is to find the opponent's Sharingan storage base. Tsunade's face was also not good. Looking at this time, her right hand pinching her brow and constantly rubbing it, but the irritability in her eyes could not be smoothed away regarding the storage base. I might be able to help. At this moment, Kakashi, who was originally standing aside in grief, suddenly spoke, addressing the people in the Hokage's office. In the next moment, the eyes of everyone in the room once again focused on him. Kakashi then took off his forehead protector, touched the eyelid covering his Sharingan, and then said, because of my strength, I have actually been exploring the secrets of this main Gekyo Sharingan. Every time I activate and use it, I can vaguely feel a hidden space. Those items or ninjutsu that I transfer away do not disappear out of thin air, but are transferred to that space. Given Obito's current situation, if he wants to find a safe enough storage base, then there should be no place more suitable than this space. Of course, this is just my guess. After all, I have never been inside. You mean, you can try to send people into that space? The third Hokage heard this, stared at Kakashi on the side, and a trace of hesitation flashed in his eyes. Obviously, facing this unknown possibility, the old fellow still cherished his life more, and even if they were safely sent in at that time, and there were indeed a large number of Sharingan collected by Obito hidden inside, how to get out afterward would also be an important issue. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 378, Stealing Home. How big can the passage of your Sharingan be opened? Tsunade took over the conversation at this time and asked a question that everyone was concerned about. How big? I've transferred things as small as a nail, the enemy's damaged limbs, and even medium-level ninjutsu, but I haven't tried transferring living organisms. After Kakashi finished speaking, his eyes unconsciously swept towards Liang Yue. Similarly, almost everyone else present except Naruto can be regarded as veterans of the Naruto world, and they quickly understood the key points. So in the next moment, he once again became the focus of everyone in the room. Okay, then let me try it. Saying this, Liang Yue was also straightforward, stood up directly from his seat, and came to the center of the office holding the little King Kong in his arms. During the process, the others didn't talk nonsense among them, besides thinking that he was duty-bound, or rather irreplaceable. It was probably because they thought Liang Yue's own strength was already strong enough, right? After all, facing the weird space-time ability of Kamui, he fought Obito twice, and both times he was able to kill the opponent. In addition, there was Liang Yue's strength in directly confronting the six-pads puppet before. Imperceptibly, a sense of trust had quietly taken root in the hearts of everyone in Konoha Shunkyu. If you can get in, whether you can come out on your own or not, I will open the passage again in 5 minutes. Looking at Liang Yue in front of him, who was ready, Kakashi came forward at this time and said with a serious face, then, without waiting for him to answer, the Sharingan in his eye socket quickly rotated, and in the blink of an eye, it transformed into a kaleidoscope. In the next moment, under the gaze of everyone around, a spiral vortex suddenly appeared out of thin air, quickly rotating in the air with Liang Yue as the center. The process was almost silent, like a blooming transparent chrysanthemum, with water-like petals constantly rotating in the Hokage's office, accompanied by the faint sound of air being sucked in. Liang Yu's external image also began to become distorted, as if a crack had been opened in space gradually. His whole person began to be swept into the hollow like a pile of unknown substances by the rotating water wave swish. However, in the next moment, Liang Yue suddenly disappeared from this distortion, and when he reappeared, his whole person had already arrived at the teleportation point outside the Hokage's office window. Did it fail? The third Hokage, who was the first to discover Liang Yu's transfer, said with slight disappointment at this time. Well, I felt like my whole body was about to be crushed, especially when passing through that passage. It's too small, I can't get through. Liang Yue flipped over the windowsill at this time, returned to the room, and shook his head at everyone. Is that so? Then it seems we need to find another way, I think. Squeak squeak squeak. Jiraiya stood aside with his arms folded, his old face also showing a bit of regret, but before he could finish speaking, the little King Kong, who had been squatting in Liang Yu's arms, suddenly jumped out at this time holding Liang Yu's ear. Standing on his shoulder, he bared his teeth and roared at Kakashi opposite him. A few times afterwards, this little guy actually began to slowly shrink under the gaze of everyone around him, from the original height and length of 20 to 30 centimeters. It directly shrank to about the size of a fist. You still have this ability. Looking at the actions of the little guy in front of him, Liang Yue pretended to be surprised. In fact, he naturally understood little King Kong's abilities from the beginning. The so-called size as desired is actually just the ability that this little guy awakened on his own when he reached level 10 at the beginning. Little King Kong could only make himself smaller with a continuous improvement of his level. He gradually mastered the skills of growing larger. Now that it has been upgraded to more than 30 levels, its control over this ability has naturally become more and more refined. However, Liang Yue was also a little surprised by little King Kong's initiative to volunteer. Now what? Do you want to try it? Looking at the little guy on Liang Yu's shoulder who had shrunk several times, Tsunade walked over with a slight frown at this time, touched the monkey's head with her finger, and then looked at Liang Yue and asked, the size looks suitable, but how is the strength of your summoning beast? Very strong. It can not only become smaller, but also bigger. Its speed and strength are both above me. If the purpose is just to destroy a batch of Sharingan reserves that may exist even if Obito is in that space, the threat to it should not be great. Saying that, Liang Yue held the little King Kong in his palm, accepting the curious and surprised gazes of everyone. Obviously, for the existence of his summoning beast, the people present did not understand it for quite a long time before, let alone the real combat ability. In fact, since coming to this Naruto world, even Liang Yue himself hadn't seen it much before. When fighting against the six-paths puppet, the process was too short, it ended in a flash, and the little guy didn't have time to exert his strength at all. But if it is said that little King Kong is simply going to fight Obito, then Liang Yue is still very confident in the strength of the behemoth war beast. Moreover, even if something goes wrong at that time, he can also instantly take little King Kong back to the pet space through the connection between him and the pet war beast. The only problem now is whether little King Kong can enter the Kamui space through Kakashi's kaleidoscope. In the end, after a brief discussion, everyone decided to let little King Kong try it out. Liang Yue also reached a tacit understanding with the little guy in secret, and kept in spiritual contact, agreeing that once an unmanageable situation occurred, he would immediately take measures at the same time, to be on the safe side. Liang Yue even left a Flying Thunder God immortal mark on little King Kong's arm. However, facts prove that Liang Yue really overthought this time. The progress of the entire process was very smooth. When Kakashi aimed the Kamui passage over, little King Kong was sent into the lower Kamui sewer very smoothly, like a small insect in a pool. Then, 5 minutes later, when Kakashi opened Kamui again, the little guy climbed out of that sewer again. During the process, Liang Yue also learned that Obito himself had never appeared. Chapter 379 Uncle Snake. The successful completion of the stealth mission undoubtedly pleased everyone present, and Liang Yue also took the opportunity to retire gracefully, not staying long in the Hokage's office, and returned home with little Kong at night, after enjoying a sumptuous dinner with the head of the Hyuga clan, Hinata, and Hanabi. The man and the monkey returned to their room at this moment. Liang Yue appeared very quiet, sitting at the table with little Kong in his arms, just like petting a cat. On the table, a pot of green tea was emitting wisps of steam, and 2 plates of snacks were exquisitely arranged, but secretly, the two were actually communicating and tallying up the gains from this operation. In addition, on the other side of the table, a light screen that only they could see was standing there. On the other side of the light screen, Princess Elfarwen, the graceful Delunana, and little eagle Rachel, who had transformed into a human lolly, were also sitting excitedly at the table on the top floor of the library tower. Each of them was excited, but with a hint of disgust on their faces, examining the glass jars one by one. Inside the transparent containers were Sharingan eyes with 3 tomos swirling within. Yes, after Little Kong entered the Kamui space, he did not choose to destroy the Sharingan reserve there, but at someone's suggestion, sent them all into my world anyway, whether taking them away or destroying them. The ultimate goal was just to prevent Obito from using them. Since that was the case, why destroy valuable assets? Of course, Liang Yue had Little Kong take away this batch of Sharingan, not for his own use, and certainly not to let others take them to play with as replacement eyeballs. In fact, this can only be regarded as a collecting hobby. Although it looks quite disgusting, it can often come in handy. For example, if he masters the Eyes Energy ninjutsu. In essence, Liang Yue has always felt that this heaven-defying ninjutsu of the Uchiha clan is somewhat similar to the body flicker technique. Otherwise, in the original plot, Danzo, who also used the Eyes Energy technique and obtained many Sharingan consumables, would not have used this technique as a body flicker technique when fighting Sasuke. Of course, compared to the original body flicker technique taught in the ninja school, the effectiveness of Eyes Energy is undoubtedly more diverse. For example, the body flicker technique can only exchange one's own position with other living or dead objects, while Eyes Energy can also restore fatal injuries on the caster to a certain extent. From this perspective, Eyes Energy seems to have integrated a part of Kamui, or rather, it is more like Hidden's weird injury swapping ritual. But this recovery ability, or reality rewriting ability, is obviously limited. In the original plot, Shikamaru buried Hidden alive, using a method that could continuously suffocate the opponent, and permanently eliminated Hidden underground. Think about it, if the first Hokage had cremated Madara after the final battle, instead of burying him in a tomb, then the probability of Madara's resurrection should not have been too high. Of course, these are just Liang Yue's own speculations, and he has not found accurate evidence because so far, he has not obtained the method to use the Eyes Energy ninjutsu. Brushed Haiuruki, the 5th Hokage wants you to go to the Hokage's office immediately. Just as Liang Yue appeared a little dazed, but was actually communicating with the 3 girls on the opposite side, a cold voice suddenly came from outside his door. Liang Yue frowned upon hearing this, took a sip of the tea on the table, and thought to himself, is there new trouble again? Thinking this in his heart, but he did not delay, replied to the other party, and with Little Kong in his arms, he flashed and flew to the window of the Hokage's office. Again, Orochimaru has been captured. This was the first sentence Tsunade said after Liang Yue jumped in through the window and waited quietly until the 3rd Hokage, Jiraiya, Mitakato Hamura, and other Konoha high-level officials arrived one after another. At this time, the 5th Hokage was propping her arms on the table, supporting her chin with both hands, with a slightly complicated expression. Really, what I feared has come. After hearing this information, Liang Yue's heart suddenly skipped a beat, and he shook his head and sighed inwardly. Is the news accurate? Compared to the others present, Jiraiya was obviously very concerned about the life and death of his classmate, so he quickly asked. Along with Orochimaru, Kaguya Kanemaru, his subordinate, was also captured. The one who brought back the news was another member of their team, Hazuki Sujetsu. Tsunade sighed softly and touched her forehead. That being said, although her relationship with Orochimaru was not good, the fact that her old classmate was captured only meant that the enemy was stronger, especially since Orochimaru had already learned the so-called sage art and achieved the innate realm. Then, who captured Orochimaru? Sasuke and Itachi. The 3rd Hokage sat aside in silence for a while, and then asked. It was the Akatsuki organization and Nagato Uzumaki who did it. Orochimaru and others have been captured for some time now. It should have happened before they invaded the village, Tsunade replied, her eyes constantly scanning the people present. Wasn't he chasing Sasuke? Why did he run into the Akatsuki organization? That's not important. The point is that Orochimaru is now in Obito's hands. Is Orochimaru still alive? For now, a living person is certainly more valuable than a dead person, but the question is, what does Obito want to achieve with him? Obito now possesses the Rinnegan, and he has never hidden his motivation to start the Ninja World War. If that's the case, then things are troublesome now that the war is imminent, and the tailed beasts of other ninja villages are still in his hands. But Konoha cannot sacrifice everything for Orochimaru alone. In this way, for the next period of time, the people in the Hokage's office engaged in a discussion that was not very intense and slowly analyzed the current situation of the ninja world in detail. Throughout the entire process, Liang Yue was always watching and did not participate. After all, knowing the beginning and end of the plot, he had already understood the context of this matter. Even if his appearance had caused some deviations in the current plot of the Naruto world, These deviated plot lines were still controllable and had not completely escaped his control, so Kabuto died. And Orochimaru is filing in. Speaking of which, is this a coincidence, or is it due to the inertia of the plot? However, logically speaking, Orochimaru, who has already advanced to the innate realm, should not be so easily defeated, right? In the original plot, Snake Sensei's weakness was low illusion resistance. Now that Orochimaru has reached the innate realm, I dare not say that he has completely made up for this deficiency, but at least he should be much stronger than in the original plot. Moreover, with Snake Sensei's current abilities, even if he faced Nagato Uzumaki, if he couldn't win, running shouldn't be a problem. A reverse summoning technique can return him to Raichi Cave. Furthermore, given Snake Sensei's personality, he shouldn't be able to do something like putting himself in danger to protect the safety of his subordinates. So, if the news of his capture is not wrong, then he must have suffered some kind of sudden or silent powerful offensive among them. The probability of a successful illusion should be relatively high, but, for an innate level master, ordinary illusions are useless, and advanced illusions take too long to prepare and are easily detected. So, Kodo Matsukami, Danzo? Chapter 380 Imminent. Danzo. Thinking of this, Liang Yu's mind suddenly popped up with a figure of this famous root of Konoha, but then he silently shook his head, unhesitatingly denying his previous thought. Generally speaking, although Danzo's methods are not very glorious, and he likes to take unorthodox paths, his loyalty to Konoha is beyond doubt. Regarding this point, it can be seen from the seal he used on half of the bridge when he died in the original plot. Moreover, Danzo had already been in contact with Orochimaru privately before Orochimaru returned to Konoha. It is said that Orochimaru was able to return to Konoha smoothly later because Danzo put in a lot of effort in the middle. Now it shouldn't be to the point of holding back on such a major matter in that case. Thinking of this, Liang Yu couldn't help but touch his chin, and turn to think in another direction. Kodo Matsukami is a top-level Jinjutsu, and can be called the pinnacle of the Jinjutsu field in the current Naruto world. It can silently change a person's will without being noticed. The scope of application and the level of influence are not yet clear anyway. The person who is subjected to the technique has never escaped the influence of this eye technique. Now that Uchiha Shisu is no longer in the world, one of his main Gekiyo Sharingan eyes that can cast Kodo Matsukami is in Danzo's hands, and the other is hidden by Itachi. According to the development of the original plot, after Itachi's death, this Sharingan eye was hidden in Naruto's stomach by him, using a crow as a carrier. But now, because of Liang Yu's involuntary intervention, Itachi does not seem to have died as in the original plot. Not only is he not dead, but at this time, under the guidance of someone, Itachi, as a super genius, may have successfully advanced to the innate realm to a great extent. In this case, the other party has more choices. Thinking of this, Liang Yu couldn't help but close his eyes, secretly activating his Byakugan, and then looked out the window. As a crucial character like the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, Naruto's residence is actually not far from the Hokage office building. The straight line distance is about 200 or 300 meters, and this distance is naturally not a problem for Liang Yu. Now in just a few seconds, his line of sight had already passed through many obstacles and landed on the little blondie who was sleeping soundly on the bed in a sprawling posture. Then, Liang Yu retracted his gaze. Sure enough, apart from the Nine-Tails seal, there is nothing unusual in his body. It seems that Itachi is planning to take care of his younger brother himself this time. So, is it Itachi who made the move? This is a bit troublesome, but with Itachi's pure and persistent will of fire, it doesn't seem likely that he would betray. Could it be that I guessed wrong? Could it be that Orochimaru was not defeated by Kodo Matsukami? Then who made the move? Just as Liang Yu was sitting beside him, frowning and thinking wildly, the other old guys and the fifth Hokage and others on the other side seemed to have completed their discussion and regained their dignified posture. However, compared to usual, their faces were mostly hidden with a bit of solemnity. Obviously, a complete pair of Rinnegan, plus the eight-tailed beasts except for the nine-tails, are now all integrated into the hands of a Bidoro, such a troublesome character, which has already made them feel the crisis of the ninja world situation. Now that Orochimaru, one of the Sannin, who has also learned Sage Mode, is also trapped and captured by the other party, it further illustrates the strength of the enemy. This time all these situations are showing one problem: the war is coming. Chunkyu, what do you think of this matter? Jiraiya on the side didn't seem to want Liang Yu to be idle at this time. He had just sat down for a short time before he looked at him. I think Orochimaru being captured is a major event and needs to be handled with caution. Liang Yu also sat upright there, speaking steadily. Compared to the others present, this guy should undoubtedly be the one who cares about Orochimaru the most. When others consider the problem, they are more concerned about the face, interests, and high-level reserves of Konoha on Jiraiya's side. He values their former classmate friendship more from this point of view. He and Naruto are really a match made in heaven. I remember that Orochimaru once used a ninjutsu called Impure World Reincarnation when fighting against the third Hokage, which can summon the souls of the first and second Hokage from the world of the dead to assist in battle in the form of puppets. I don't know how many dead people Orochimaru can summon back at the same time now based on his understanding of the plot. Liang Yue naturally told what would happen later, and the people present all changed their colors after hearing his words. Obviously, this key issue is not considered by the third Hokage and others before, as for will Orochimaru succumb to Obito's threat and help the other party in order to survive. In the eyes of the third Hokage, Tsunade, Kaoru Udatane, Hamura Mitakato, and other Konoha high-level officials, this is almost certain, because Uncle Snake seems to have always been a selfish person. In order to live a long life, he is committed to researching various forbidden techniques, including impure world reincarnation, and has developed a method that can achieve reincarnation by invading other people's bodies even. In order to be able to learn the Sage Mode exclusive to humans from Liang Yue, Orochimaru, who had already been at odds with Konoha, could change his course again, pay a huge price, and shamelessly return to the village again. All these things have already shown that Orochimaru's goal in life is to live a long life and pursue immortality. Now, in order to survive, will he help Obito fight against the ninja world? The answer is almost certain. Even Jiraiya cannot deny this. This is troublesome. Therefore, after being reminded by Liang Yue, in the following time, the group of Konoha high-level officials in the current Hokage office once again entered into a fierce discussion. In the end, the old guy, the third Hokage, personally made a decision, and Konoha's main tasks were divided into three parts. First, and most importantly, it is natural to ensure the safety of Konoha village, which is the premise of everything. Second, it is necessary to focus on dealing with possible changes in the ninja world situation, or even war, including the 5-Cage Summit a few days later, ensuring the safety of the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki Naruto, etc. This part of the action is mainly concentrated on the frontal battlefield. Third, it is natural to go all out to investigate and actively rescue Orochimaru. Liang Yue was assigned to this third part of the task, and his old partner Jiraiya was also with him. The two are the main force in this rescue operation. In addition, a squad of Anbu will follow to coordinate and be responsible for handling some miscellaneous matters. Hazuki Sujetsu, who brought back the news that Orochimaru and Kaguya Kimimaro were captured, was also assigned to this task force. In addition, when the time came to early morning, when the group was about to set off overnight, after hearing about the mission of the group from nowhere, Hugo, who originally belonged to Orochimaru's command, also volunteered to join, and Jiraiya, as the leader of this mission, didn't care about anything. Maybe he felt that the other party was loyal enough to Orochimaru, so he agreed with a gratified look. Translated sentences. Chapter 381 Iron Country. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed under the leadership of Jiraiya, and guided by Sujetsu Hazuki, a first-hand witness. Liang Yue and the other members of the third squad ultimately came up empty-handed during the process, although it couldn't be said that they found no clues at all, as something that had happened before Nagato Uzumaki's invasion of Konoha. Orochimaru, having become a captive, was now likely like money swindled by fraudsters, passed through several hands and tucked away in some unknown corner of the ninja world, or he might simply be kept by Obito Uchiha for future battlefield arrangements and needs. In this situation, trying to rescue Orochimaru through searching and tracking was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Bang! Beneath a tall, dense forest hill, accompanied by a muffled thud and a spreading white mist, an orange toad the size of a wash basin appeared before everyone's eyes. It's confirmed, Jiraiya. According to the information from Raichi Cave, Orochimaru's summoning contract hasn't been cancelled, the connection still exists, meaning he's not dead. It's just that the contract channel between them has become very obscure, probably because he's been hidden in some secluded and secret area, or interfered with by some special ninjutsu. After saying that, without waiting for a response, the toad transformed into a cloud of white mist and disappeared, leaving the surrounding people looking at each other in dismay. It's good he's not dead, but the problem is, where's he hidden? Jiraiya visibly breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing this, crossing his arms and frowning. Liang Yue, meanwhile, was sitting idly on a nearby rock, his expression calm, but his eyes occasionally flashed with a faint glimmer, clearly indicating that he was also thinking. However, Liang Yue wasn't considering strategies or plans to rescue Orochimaru. The ninja world, frankly speaking, is still a world where strength reigns supreme, and besides, Liang Yue didn't have any long-term management plans in his heart. Once the mission time was up, he would leave directly. Naturally, he wouldn't care too much about the interpersonal relationships here. Orochimaru's character was indeed full of charm, a scientific genius, a fanatic, with a firm will, resorting to any means to achieve his goals, and even able to redeem himself at the end, preserving himself based on what he could do. Out of respect for an allied figure, Liang Yue would naturally save him if he could anyway. There was nothing to lose, and he might even gain some extra experience, but conversely, it didn't matter, and in fact, Liang Yue didn't have any plans to bring Orochimaru out of the ninja world. I didn't think about it before, but if I think about it, Orochimaru seems to be a very capable subordinate, and I seem to be lacking a group of researchers. Once this thought arose, it immediately sprouted in Liang Yue's mind. Subsequently, this guy began to constantly weigh the pros and cons in his mind as for whether Orochimaru, the person involved, would agree. He didn't think too deeply about it after all. The answer was almost self-evident. As someone who aspires to pursue immortality, if there is an opportunity to break free from the cage and soar to the heavens, if he doesn't seize it tightly, then he is not Orochimaru. The ninja world is simply too small according to Liang Yue's understanding over the years. The Naruto world in front of him, although seemingly a planet from the perspective of the universe and planets, still has a considerable gap from Earth in terms of land area and living environment. The countries belonging to the 5 great ninja villages, although known as the 5 great nations of the ninja world, in terms of land area, add up to only 1 or 2 provinces of China. Of course, according to the development of the Naruto plot, in the later stages, there will be aliens from the Otsutsuki clan continuing to descend upon the ninja world. If the worldview here can be developed and brought into the universe, then the so-called territory, land and other issues will no longer be problems. However, that is no longer something that Liang Yue needs to consider. After all, his mission period this time is very long compared to the past, but if it is placed on the scale of the universe, a dozen years is really nothing. Such a short period of time is not enough for him to develop alien spaceships. Chunchuhum. Just as Liang Yue was sitting there lost in thought, Jiraiya suddenly interrupted his divergent thinking. I think the reason why the summoning contract between Orochimaru and Raichi Cave is being blocked is likely due to being isolated from the world. Abido's closed space is highly suspected. Why don't you go back and find Kakashi, and let your little monkey go in again? Okay. Liang Yue didn't decline, and after getting up, he threw a specially made Sage Kunai to Jiraiya, and then returned to the ninja village with a flying thunder god technique. At the same time, under the threat of war and peace, survival and development, and the successive loss of the village's tailed beasts, the action efficiency of the 5 great ninja villages in the ninja world has begun to improve as never before. Vaguely, the ninjas belonging to all parties also have a premonition that a moment of turbulence and crisis is getting closer and closer to them. During these 3 days when Jiraiya, Liang Yue and others were clueless and running around, the leadership of each ninja village had also gathered in the territory of the neutral Iron Country outside the 5 great ninja villages, and began discussions and negotiations on this crisis. Therefore, when Liang Yue returned to Konoha village, to the teleportation point outside the Hokage office window, the person sitting behind the desk handling Konoha affairs had been replaced by the 3rd Hokage. After a brief exchange, Liang Yue learned that Tsunade had arrived at the 5-cage summit in the Iron Country, and Kakashi was also acting as the Hokage's guard, accompanying her. So without further ado, after briefly sharing the experiences of his 3rd squad over the past few days with the 3rd Hokage, Liang Yue also headed towards the Iron Country. Hinata, as a ninja who had officially graduated from the Ninja Academy, was also heading to the Iron Country with her other 2 teammates under the leadership of her team teacher, Kyorna Iyuhi. Moreover, out of safety considerations, Little Kongao, as a powerful combat unit, was also given to Hinata by Liang Yue before the 3rd squad set off, to ensure complete support. This makes things easier. Everyone is running together, scratching the hair on his head. After a period of calculation, Liang Yue had just walked out of Konoha and figured out the best movement trajectory for the teleportation point. As a space-time ninjutsu, Flying Thunder God technique can greatly improve the mobility of the caster, ignoring most spatial distances, but this teleportation method is not without its limitations. In addition to the considerable amount of energy required each time it is activated, the spatial movement distance of the ninjutsu itself also has considerable limitations. So in order to solve this problem, in the past few years, in addition to occasionally sending a few specially made kunai engraved with the Sage formula to trusted partners when going out to perform tasks, he would also leave his Flying Thunder God formula in some secret locations in the Iron Country. As a plot scene with considerable status in the Naruto world plot, Liang Yue would naturally not let it go. Chapter 382. Looking forward to it. After arriving in the land of iron, it didn't take Liang Yue much effort to find Kakashi, who was loitering outside the 5-cage summit venue, accompanied by a depressed-looking, bruised and swollen little blondie. Honestly, looking at Naruto, whose face was so beaten out of shape, Liang Yue almost didn't recognize him based on his knowledge of the Naruto storyline. A little thought revealed that Naruto's injuries were likely inflicted by a group of young ninjas from the Raikage's village, the reason being that the Raikage's people firmly believed that the Konoha defector Sasuke had captured their village's rapping sensation, the Eight-Tails Jinchuriki, Killer Bee. Furthermore, Killer Bee was now likely dead and Naruto, the little blondie, just like in the original story, wouldn't give up chasing after Sasuke due to his brotherly feelings, just like Jiraiya in his younger days. Under these circumstances, a natural conflict arose between the two sides, coupled with the generally fiery temperaments of the Raikage's ninjas, and things blew up as soon as they met in private during the summit. However, Naruto clearly knew that he was in the wrong, so he didn't retaliate at the time. Remaining passively beaten, he even refrained from using the Nine-Tails chakra to heal his injuries afterward. Of course, the situation quickly took a turn in the original storyline. Obito came directly to the 5-cage summit venue and, while declaring war, also clarified that the Akatsuki organization hadn't captured the Eight-Tails and Killer Bee, but only brought back a squid tentacle. I wonder if Sasuke will still come and make a scene like in the story. After meeting Kakashi and Naruto, they didn't immediately carry out Jiraiya's request, but first went through the proper channels. They reported the matter to Tsunade, and then began the second steal the home base operation in the 5th Hokage's office at her residence. With Liang Yue's arrival, Xiao Kong, as his exclusive battle beast, naturally sensed it before the Hokage could send someone to find him. The little guy had already brought Hinata to the office, arriving just in time. So, you're saying that your Team 3 has been running around for all these days without any results? Seeing Kakashi once again activate his Kamui skill, creating a space-time vortex in the air, and Xiao Kong eagerly jumping into it, Tsunade tilted her head towards Liang Yue with her arms crossed. An imperceptible hint of complexity appeared on her face. This obviously corresponded to Tsunade's personal feelings and impressions of Orochimaru. Yes, after all, this matter has been going on for some time now, and with his methods, it would indeed be difficult to track him down if he really intended to hide. Speaking of which, in the original storyline, the person who truly resolved the battlefield crisis brought about by the impure world reincarnation was Itachi. Now Orochimaru has replaced Kabuto's position, but theoretically, there isn't much difference between the two anyway, as they both require the caster to abandon the ninjutsu's continuation. But the current problem is that Itachi doesn't seem to be dead yet, so naturally he won't be summoned by impure world reincarnation without the connection between the caster and the recipient. I don't know if he can still find the other party's exact hiding place. However, some time ago, Itachi and Sasuke seem to have been mixed up within the Akatsuki organization. Even though Nagato and Konan are now dead, if they really put their minds to it, they should still be able to find some clues, right? In comparison, Liang Yue's so-called method was not much different from Itachi's way of tracking down Kabuto in the original story, both relying on the connection between the caster and the recipient to implement it. The only difference was that Liang Yue also needed to use his heart to indirectly implement the step hair manipulation level 610 current level 6, an instinctive manipulation method from the genetic level. In principle, the stronger the mental power, the more the power of the ability can be exerted. Skill effect: flexibly control the length, curvature, extension, hardness, and color of hair characteristics. Infinite: as long as there is energy, it can be regenerated infinitely. Toughness: the toughness is comparable to aerospace-grade metal. Resistance: possesses a good degree of resistance to energy attacks such as magic and true ki. Spirit communication: can become a medium for communication with spirits and has a certain binding effect. Ability proficiency: 4,087,951. 5 million. Obviously, this so-called spirit communication characteristic was Liang Yue's reliance, although he hadn't had any records of directly using his hair to bind people's souls to achieve the purpose of spirit communication. But this guy usually didn't do fewer experiments on some small animals. Even once, while on a mission in Konoha, Liang Yue had even caught a summoning beast belonging to a mission target, and indirectly pinpointed the target's location through soul communication. Therefore, as soon as the news of Orochimaru's capture came, he almost immediately thought of this follow-up response plan. The reason why he hadn't announced this information and ability was simply because Liang Yue didn't want to expose his trump cards in front of outsiders for the time being. It only took Xiao Kong about 5 minutes to come out of the Kamui space channel again. The result was also quite disappointing. Neither Orochimaru nor Obito were present in that small space at this time. Tsunade, Kakashi, and others were silent in response to this result. In fact, Liang Yue had already learned of this news through the mental link between him and his exclusive battle beast. A moment Xiao Jinkong entered the Kamui space. Thinking about it, it was normal after all. Just not long ago, they had just stolen all the Sharingan that Obito had stored in the Kamui space. Through this method, given the premise of learning from one's mistakes, it would be a ghost if Obito could hide Orochimaru here. Alright, since he's not in that space, Shunkyu, go back and report this news to Jiraiya. Also, the situation in the ninja world has been tense recently. I have a premonition that the war may break out at any time. The Uchiha with the Rinnegan is indeed very dangerous, so be careful on your side too if necessary. Come directly and join the main force. Okay. After handing over with Tsunade, Liang Yue then handed Xiao Jinkong back to Hinata, and set off on his way back alone. Although he really wanted to continue staying on the 5-cage summit side, waiting for the first scene of the next plot to unfold, it would be best if he could find a way to leave Obito directly, or take back the Rinnegan, or even destroy it in this way. The subsequent plot would naturally end directly. How simple and clear, but thinking carefully, if Liang Yue really did this, it would inevitably lead to other troubles in the subsequent time period. Most importantly, Black Zetsu would definitely lurk again. This guy is a true master of concealment. Once he intends to hide, it won't take too long as he waits for another 10 years or so. When the system task automatically fails, Liang Yue really won't have any temper. Therefore, for him, the safest and most comfortable approach at present is to go through the established process once until a certain moment. After Liang Yue has enough confidence, he will jump out and complete a sure kill. Chapter 383 Deliver at your door. Returning to the third squad and reporting the information he had obtained, Jiraiya, whose usually youthful face was still carrying a hint of expectation, immediately fell silent. Following that, the old guy began to furrow his brow and ponder deeply. Clearly, as a prominent figure who had traveled throughout the ninja world for many years, and having witnessed the ups and downs of various events, this guy understood that the current situation was not optimistic, with the ninja world war potentially erupting at any moment, and the enemies they faced being even more unfathomable. The appearance of a pair of Rinnegan eyes further intensified the sense of urgency in Jiraiya's heart. However, to say that he would give up on this matter was equally unrealistic, whether from the perspective of personal friendship or the threat of war. Orochimaru had to be rescued, which was the essential premise for the third squad's existence and formation. Thus, in the following time, the search and rescue operation continued. At the same time, Jiraiya, concerned about the safety of the ninja world, also assigned Liang Yue another task. That was, he needed to maintain constant contacts between the village and the 5-cage summit in the Land of Iron, ensuring daily communication of information between the two locations and their side in necessary situations. This was truly a real life example of those above moving their mouths while those below run their legs off. With the ultra mobility granted by the Flying Thunder God technique, a space-time ninjutsu, Liang Yue could naturally achieve repeated jumps and rapid transfers between the three locations. However, the consumption of chakra, or rather, spiritual energy, was not something that ordinary ninjas could bear. Moreover, the consumption involved in this type of large-scale, long-distance transfer space-time ninjutsu is even more unimaginable for ordinary people. Think about the fourth Hokage in the original storyline, who nearly exhausted all the chakra in his body just by using the Flying Thunder God technique a few times at short distances during Obito's invasion of Konoha. As a result, unable to continue, he had to sacrifice himself for the village at a young age. Fortunately, Liang Yue didn't care about this bit of consumption. After creating a shadow clone and controlling it to run to a secluded place nearby to cultivate, he happily accepted this task. In this way, unknowingly, another week passed in the tense but unproductive pace of the group's progresses in the original storyline. During this period, in order to protect Naruto and Killer Bee, the only remaining Jinchuriki units in the 5 great ninja villages, the two were sent to the legendary Turtle Island under the joint decision of the Hokage and Raikage. Many guards, led by elite ninjas, also went with them. Turtle Island was an island located on the back of a giant turtle, inhabited by many giant creatures that were intelligent and spoke human language, the kind that could be used as summoning beasts. In addition, there was also a mental trial ground behind a waterfall, which allowed the trial taker to face their own dark side, helping to eliminate inner demons, and was said to be of great help to the Jinchuriki in mastering the power of the tailed beasts. Liang Yue was very curious about this mental trial ground and always wanted to go in and explore, but unfortunately, he had no chance to enter for the time being. What was different from the original storyline was that Sasuke didn't come to disrupt the 5-cage summit this time, and Obito hadn't run over to declare war on the 5-cage either. Moreover, The return of the eight-tails Jinchuriki, Killer Bee, was not because he had been reminded by Bido and was brought back by the Raikage himself. His appearance was accidental, as he was found by Jiraiya and Liang Yu's third squad in a mountain forest where a ninja world musician had been living in seclusion. Subsequently, Liang Yu personally provided remote express delivery service, using the Flying Thunder God technique to transfer him several times to the 5-cage summit on this day. The third squad to which the group belonged was aimlessly patrolling a forest located at the border between the Land of Iron and the Land of Rice Fields at this time. The sky above was somewhat gloomy, and strong winds blew through the sky from time to time, disturbing the trees and causing them to sway through the dense trees and branches around. Flashes of lightning occasionally shone down. In such an environment, the people in the squad couldn't help but feel a little nervous, interpreting every rustle of leaves as a potential enemy, and they would send out scouts from time to time to conduct small-scale investigations in various directions. However, it was no wonder that the people in the team were nervous. Although the Great War in the ninja world had not yet officially begun, some sporadic harassment had already appeared on the road the third squad was traveling. Although those strange, pale-skinned people were not outstanding in strength, and even had some problems with their intelligence, they were good at hiding their tracks due to their large numbers, making it a situation where the enemy was hidden and they were exposed after several days in a row. It was inevitable that everyone would feel a little tired of dealing with it. In comparison, Liang Yu should be the most relaxed person in the team. After all, whether it was by a Kyugen or spiritual sense, he could detect the traces of these white Zetsu in time. As long as they intruded into a certain range around the squad, they would inevitably be noticed by him, and then he would send them to the west without hesitation. Compared to the tense state of other people, Liang Yu was rather enjoying it. After all, killing white Zetsu also granted experience. Closing together from left to right, it wrapped the head inside. More importantly, this thing had a unique, half-black and half-white body. At this moment, this figure was hiding in the branches of a large tree more than 100 meters away from the third squad, with half of its body submerged in the tree trunk. Hiding in the flickering shadows, it quietly looked over Black Zetsu. Finally couldn't help but show up. After discovering this, Liang Yu suddenly perked up, and a faint arc unconsciously appeared at the corner of his mouth facing this target person who is in the must-kill ranks of his main mission in this descent to the ninja world. Liang Yu suddenly became excited for some reason. Almost the next moment after noticing the other party, Liang Yu started without hesitation. With his superhuman physical fitness, he burst out from the spot in an instant. The whole person turned into a phantom, heading straight towards the other party without any concealment. At the same time, in order to prevent Black Zetsu from escaping, the spiritual energy in Liang Yu's body also surged in an instant, pouring into his pair of Byakugan at all costs. Only halfway through the flight, a bright cyan robe had already condensed around Liang Yu's body. With a drastic consumption of spiritual power, the edges of this robe were like flowing flames, instantly illuminating the surrounding originally dim forest. Also illuminated was Black Zetsu's face, full of astonishment. Since you're here, don't even think about leaving. Chapter 384, The Earth-Shattering Star. Without any hesitation, facing his main quest objective, the moment he activated Tensigen mode, Liang Yu abruptly clasped his hands together, delivering an irresistible ultimate move to Black Zetsu mid-flight. Jiba Jetsu tennis. As the saying goes, a lion uses its full strength even when hunting a rabbit. What Liang Yu was facing was a schemer who controlled the entire plot of the Naruto world. For thousands of years, he had been hiding in the shadows, implementing various destructive plans to split the moon and save his mother. Most importantly, Black Zetsu isn't an ordinary individual creature that can be easily destroyed by physical means. Its essence is a pseudo-spiritual entity, a product of Kaguya Otsutsuki's spiritual will. To be precise, it should be a strange species where spiritual power is condensed into substance and possesses self-awareness. Although Black Zetsu's combat power is not high due to physical limitations, its long-standing survival wisdom has allowed it to master hiding and escape techniques almost unparalleled in the ninja world. More importantly, facing such a species that he had never fought before, Liang Yu himself didn't know how to kill it. In the original plot, even Naruto and Sasuke, who both possessed 6th path level strength, ultimately only resealed Kaguya Otsutsuki and Black Zetsu. Therefore, facing such an unknown creature at this moment, Liang Yu naturally had to go all out. As that low shout left his mouth in an instant, a force representing the limit of Liang Yu's current control over gravity began to rapidly contract, centered on Black Zetsu. Rumble. For a time, branches and leaves filled the sky, earth and stones disintegrated, and even the air seemed to be infused with solid concrete, becoming tangible. The large tree where Black Zetsu was hiding was directly crushed into dust by the powerful gravity, and it condensed together with the large pieces of earth and stone that continued to gather from below, quickly forming a sphere of earth and stone with a radius of about 20 meters, slowly rising into the air, at this moment, from the perspective of the Tensigan. Through the increasingly thick solidified earth and stone, Liang Yue looked at Black Zetsu's face full of horror and the twisted expression under the crushing gravity, but he didn't feel any relaxation in his heart with a thought. The system task panel immediately appeared before his eyes after glancing at the unchanged main quest data above. The solemnity in Liang Yue's heart became even heavier as expected. Simply trapping or sealing Black Zetsu is nothing, but if you want to truly eliminate this thing, you really need to put in extra effort. Thinking of this, Liang Yue's eyebrows furrowed slightly, and feeling somewhat unwilling, his originally tightly clasped hands couldn't help but slam together again. And he lightly shouted, "Ha!" In an instant, a solemn aura emanated from his body, and the bright science spiritual power seemed to be atomized at this moment, rendering the surroundings hazy, as if even the air was about to shatter, and with his movements, the original stone sphere with a radius of about 20 meters seemed to be subjected to even more violent centripetal force, and began to violently compress inward again, crack 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 bang, amidst the scattering of earth mist. The stone sphere in the sky was forcibly compressed to a radius of only 11 or 12 meters. The originally rough surface of the stone sphere had become much smoother at this time. Although it couldn't be said to be as smooth as a mirror, it had at least reached the standard of white marble. Who's secretly shaking his head? Liang Yue then dissipated the spiritual power code around his body and deactivated Tensigan mode. However, even if he took the initiative to end the ninjutsu, the stone sphere formed by Chibaku Tensei was still intact. It floated motionless in the air, as if it had broken free from the shackles of gravity. In fact, this is precisely the brilliance of the Chibaku Tensei technique. The reason why it is called the strongest sealing ninjutsu is that the caster uses the ability to control gravity to generate a permanent small gravitational node on the stone sphere, just like the moon in the ninja world sky. Independent of the current ninja world planet, it can give the sealed creature in Chibaku Tensei a permanent gravitational suppression. In this process, the sealed person's every move will be greatly restricted, basically unable to move at all. That is why Kaguya Otsutsuki has been continuously sealed in the moon for thousands of years and has not been able to escape. Of course, the Chibaku Tensei technique also has many shortcomings. For example, compared to general sealing ninjutsu, its composition form is too rigid, and the gravitational suppression force basically does not change. It also almost purely suppresses the sealer with physical forms such as gravity. For example, after Chibaku Tensei is formed, it will unconsciously attract surrounding objects together. This can originally be regarded as a factor to assist and strengthen the stability of the ninjutsu, but in some cases, it is also its weakness. In the original plot, Mamashiki Otsutsuki once used the earth-release ninjutsu Inuke Takuro no Mikado to forcibly change the shape of the rocks on the periphery of Chibaku Tensei, indirectly destroying the gravitational balance within, thereby breaking free. Also, for example, the sealing ability of this ninjutsu has a limit. If the strength, size, and other factors of the sealed person suddenly increase or become larger, the seal will become loose as a result. Also in the original plot, Naruto once borrowed a nine-tail sealed in his body to use the materialized chakra to transform his body and break the Chibaku Tensei, but fortunately, the current Black Zetsu does not have these abilities. Purely evaluating in terms of combat power, it is actually quite weak and not worth worrying about. Just like now, facing Liang Yue, who suddenly made a move, Black Zetsu had almost no resistance, and even its escape and hiding methods, which it had relied on for thousands of years, were too late to use. Moreover, now that Liang Yue has Black Zetsu under control, of course he won't just leave it here. Being able to carry it with him and take it out at any time to experiment and try to destroy it is the best policy. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 385. I Took the Wrong Road. Hey Spring! Hearing the shout from below, Liang Yue looked back and saw that the third squad had already subconsciously scattered to the surrounding areas. Monitoring the surroundings in a vigilant formation, Jiraiya was standing near the top of a large tree, shouting to him from afar. Is it an important enemy? Seeing that Liang Yue had taken the initiative to reveal the Tensigan mode, Jiraiya couldn't help but become cautious, with a hint of excitement on his old face. It's over. This enemy is a bit like those white things we encountered before. Good at escaping. I guess it should be a leader-like figure. Liang Yue didn't plan to explain too much about Black Zetsu after all, according to the development of the plot. Most people in the ninja world at this time should not know of its existence. Logically speaking, Hinata Uruiki shouldn't know either. After speaking, Liang Yue suddenly stretched out an arm towards the Chibaku Tensei in front of him as the spiritual power in his body surged. A layer of azure spiritual power cult had already enveloped his palm. Almighty push. With the assistance of Byakugan and Divine Sense, Liang Yue almost instantly locked onto Black Zetsu, located in the center of the stone sphere. After a series of violent operations, the gravitational node original E belonging to Chibaku Tensei inside was dug out by him. As a result, large pieces of earth and stone began to collapse and disintegrate, falling onto the broken walls and ruins below. Looking at Liang Yue at this time, there was already a luminous body about the size of a basketball half a meter above his palm. Black Zetsu was curled up into a ball at this time, tightly suppressed in the center. However, don't think that Liang Yue's operation at this time is so light and breezy, as if he can solve everything just by shouting the name of the skill at will. The light sphere in front of him is actually a kind of extreme operation in terms of gravity for him at present. The general principle is to first use Chibaku Tensei as the core to seal Black Zetsu inside, and then use Almighty Push as the outer skin to offset the former's influence on external things. Gravity and repulsive force coexist, and the two are only separated by a small gap. The fact that these two completely opposite gravitational control directions can coexist without interfering with each other is entirely because Liang Yue controls them well, and has achieved certain results in the precise control of abilities. Of course, the reason why there has been such progress in gravity in just a few years is, in the final analysis, due to the bloodline of the Hyuga family. If this situation were to be replaced by Naruto, that big fool, relying on the bloodline of the Uzumaki clan, even Nagato, who possesses a pair of Rinnegan, would probably find it difficult to do what the surrounding people gathered one after another, looking at the black mass in the center of the light ball, with surprise on their faces. Jiraiya was also puzzled at this time, widened his eyes, and couldn't help but ask, yes, this is a strange creature. It can be a human, or it can be attached to that kind of white thing, including now that it's curled up into a ball and still hasn't died. Can be killed? If you say that, it doesn't seem simple. What do you plan to do? Let's seal it up for now, and destroy it when we find a way. Liang Yue seemed very solemn at this time. After completely stabilizing the structure of this light ball, he was still a little uneasy, and couldn't help but enter the Tensigen mode again. He used yin-yang release to create a black ball and wrapped it up. Then he used the 4-symbol sealing technique to seal it in a scroll. At this point, Liang Yue could be considered to have breathed a sigh of relief. Now I finally don't have to worry about not completing the main quest in the following time. The third squad continued to search for a needle in a haystack. However, perhaps because of the lack of Black Zetsu's assistance, Obito, who was secretly planning to create a new world, seemed unable to suppress the desire in his heart. Only 2 days later, news came from the Allied forces that large numbers of white Zetsu began to appear in large quantities within the borders of the 5 major countries, and frequently harassed the garrisons in various places. In addition to the troop gathering places of the major countries, even the surrounding areas of the ninja villages, which serve as the headquarters, began to have white Zetsu teams appearing. What is even more worrying is that among the white Zetsu teams, there seemed to be some elite ninjas from the major ninja villages who had died in the past. Among them, there were even former cage-level powerhouses from various ninja villages. In contrast, the third squad, where Liang Yue was located, was still far from completing its mission to rescue Orochimaru, and still had no gains. Therefore, under such circumstances, it was inevitable that some members of their team began to feel restless and distracted, especially Jiraiya. As the leader of the team, he often clamored to return to the front line to fight happily. Unfortunately, the order from Tsunade was for them to continue their previous mission. Liang Yue also agreed with this. With Konoha's current strength, it should be no problem to cope with the situation in the original work, unless Obito suddenly attacks with the power of the Rinnegan. Even if Madara appears, facing a congenital level master, he may not be able to win steadily. On the contrary, it is a more urgent task for their third squad to find Orochimaru in time and end the threat of impure world reincarnation to the Allied forces. It's just that, in the original plot, Madara seems to also know impure world reincarnation. Could this be taught to him by Black Zetsu? If Black Zetsu knows it, then Obito. If that's the case, then Snake. But it doesn't matter. Anyway, I don't care about his safety, and if this impure world reincarnation is really not performed by Orochimaru, then Obito should be the main culprit. After all, that guy Kabuto was killed by me a long time ago, and even the main quest is already on the list. The current problem is, lacking a test subject who has been reincarnated with impure world reincarnation Kusagakure. A wilderness with sparse trees and shrubs growing all over the ground. The third squad and his party are walking in it in twos and threes at this time. Jiraiya, as the leader, consciously took the lead, striding forward and leading the way, while Liang Yue was responsible for guarding the rear. Looking around, the surroundings were silent and empty, with few people, and only a few birds occasionally flying across the sky. The scene is completely out of tune with the current situation in the ninja world, where the situation is turbulent and the war is imminent. Obviously, Jiraiya, as the guide, took the wrong road after a while, about half an hour later. Perhaps even he himself realized the problem, so he immediately ordered the team members to rest in place. Jiraiya himself then took Hazuki Sujetsu, who was yawning, and Hugo, who had a bitter face, to Liang Yue's side, searching like, "This is not a solution, Hiroyuki. Why don't you run again and discuss it with Tsunade? I don't think Tsunade's decision is wrong. Our team's mission is indeed very important, of course I know this, but the problem now is that there are no clues. Didn't you see that it's been most of the day, and we haven't even encountered those white things again?" "That's true. The war on the front line is tight now, alright. If there were a few people who had been reincarnated with impure world reincarnation at this time, that would be great. Oh? Do you mean that you can find the person who summoned them behind the scenes through those things?" "Not sure yet, but this is, after all, a clue. Then you go and catch a few back." Chapter 386, The Golden Horn and the Silver Horn. And so, after leaving the squad, Liang Yue once again shifted the battlefield. However, he didn't choose to wander around this time, randomly searching for targets to capture as the Hokage. Tsunade should still be near the 5-cage summit, staying with the leaders and elites of the other 5 villages to coordinate the overall situation, so she's very safe. He estimates that she won't have time to deal with him for the time being. Therefore, Liang Yue chose to go to the 5 villages Allied Forces Intelligence Agency at this time, which is the information collection station in the original plot that was responsible for observing the movements of the entire battlefield through formations and family ninjutsu. Through communication with the personnel of the intelligence station, Liang Yue discovered that the current battlefield situation seemed to be quite abnormal. Of course, this feeling was not Liang Yue's own conclusion, but rather conveyed to him by Shikoku Nara, the chief strategist of Konoha. Intelligent as he is, he discovered that although this war behavior from Ibido seemed fierce, attacking from all sides with great momentum, for the allied forces of the 5 great nations, it was merely adding some trouble, whether it was the tens of thousands of white Zetsu or those reanimated impure world resurrection ninjas who were once very powerful, but whose strength characteristics had long been grasped by each village. Their invasion did increase the pressure on the allied forces, but it did not exceed a certain limit, and there was a considerable gap between it and the extent that they had previously expected. Therefore, Shikoku Nara came to a conclusion, which was that the other party was stalling for time. Liang Yue deeply agreed with this. After all, from the beginning, he knew that Ibido's purpose was not as simple as destroying the 5 great ninja villages. On this basis, he also wanted to create a world with only him and Rin, and then use this to reproduce and act as the Adam and Eve of the new century. Unfortunately, Liang Yue couldn't share secrets and intelligence of this scale with others. On the contrary, he himself obtained some other valuable information through Shikoku Nara's narration. For example, Madara might not have been summoned yet, otherwise, the comrades in this intelligence station would no longer say that they felt no pressure. The current 5-cage wouldn't be staying safely in the rear, waiting for an opportunity to move. Also, the former cage level ninjas of the 5 great ninja villages rarely appeared for the same reason. In addition, Ibido that guy also did not appear. So, where's the most troublesome place on the current battlefield? The scene flashed, and after several transitions and teleports, Liang Yue arrived at the battlefield where Kinkaku and Jinkaku were located. Similar to the situation in the original plot, the area in front of him was still a beach above the sky. A dazzling sun hung high all around, the vegetation was sparse, and stone cliffs were widely distributed at this moment. On the slightly rippling sea surface and the stone beach, the allied ninja forces from various countries were fiercely fighting with a pile of white Zetsu. The sounds of shouting, weapon collisions, and ninjutsu explosions mixed together, incessant. Liang Yue looked around and quickly discovered that the current battle situation was indeed as Shikoku Nara said. The 2 sides seemed to be fighting fiercely back and forth. However, the strength of the white Zetsu could only be described as mediocre, although it's not to say that they would be unilaterally slaughtered when facing the allied ninja forces. The pressure they formed on the ninjas was definitely not great, far less cruel than the wars that used to occur between the major ninja villages and the ninja world. Besides that, Only in a few scattered individual areas could those ninjas who were reanimated through impure world reincarnation bring some casualties and trouble to the Allied forces, but under the siege of the surrounding ninjas, the Allied forces still held the advantage in this battlefield situation, of course. This was not the focus for Liang Yue. His goal this time was very simple and direct, which was to capture Kinkaku and Jinkaku, who were reanimated through impure world reincarnation. To be precise, it was to capture their souls. According to the development of the original work, the status of these two inhuman and ghostly freaks in the plot is definitely not low. In their lifetime, these brothers were once swallowed into the stomach of the nine-tailed fox during a battle with it, but the fierce duo were also not easy to deal with, and they directly continue their lives by gnawing on the flesh and blood of the nine tails. In the end, even the powerful nine tails had to take the initiative to spit these two out of its stomach. Kinkaku and Jinkaku also obtained some of the nine tails chakra. As a result, in addition, these two also possessed the bloodline of the Sage of Six Paths and could freely control the Sage of Six Paths' 5 great ninja tools, so their strength should not be underestimated. At the same time, in the original plot, because they possessed the nine tails chakra, when the nine tails main body could not be captured in time, these two became the necessary tools for successfully fusing the 10 tails. Therefore, these two unlucky brothers are now not only enemies of the Allied ninja forces and the 5 great nations, but also nourishment for Obito, Madara, and others on their path to becoming the Sage of Six Paths. Tragic. As soon as his vision swept across, almost as soon as he arrived at the seaside battlefield, Liang Yue searched the sea surface for the figures of Kinkaku and Jinkaku from a distance. Looking at the pair of black horns that seemed real but not on the heads of these two, Liang Yue couldn't help but scratch his head for a moment. He didn't know how to judge their race in his heart. Speaking of which, people of the Otsutsuki clan seem to have a high probability of growing horns on their heads. Right, now I seem to have their clan's bloodline, although it has been diluted by the primitive races of this ninja world planet. It's not very pure, but it's still a direct line, this kind of thing. Thinking of this, Liang Yue couldn't help but feel tangled in his heart, wondering why he hadn't considered this issue before. If I really grow horns on my head in the future, wouldn't I be regarded as a monster? Thinking of this, Liang Yue unconsciously bared his teeth. It was also at this moment that an unseeing white Zetsu suddenly emerged from the side, taking advantage of his dazed moment, holding a wooden thorn in his hand and stabbing it towards his temple from the side. Seeing this, Liang Yue, who was in a depressed mood, suddenly became even more irritable and his heart. His figure twisted, dodging the wooden thorn, and at the same time, his whole person instantly completed the transformation from extreme stillness to violent movement. Bang! Along with a low muffled explosion, this white Zetsu who could use wood release was suddenly knocked away by Liang Yue with a short and direct iron mountain lean. Then, with a soft thud, like a piece of cloth, his whole body limply stuck to the big rock behind him. Chapter 387 Blightstorm 2. However, just at this moment, just as Liang Yue casually smashed this white Zetsu into a flattened mud painting, the surrounding white Zetsu, who were still fiercely battling the allied shinobi forces from all sides, suddenly seemed to receive some kind of command almost simultaneously. They ceased their original actions in unison, whether they were ruthlessly attacking enemy shinobi or facing moments of crisis. The white Zetsu all stopped, their eyes gleaming as they looked towards Liang Yue. Immediately afterward, these white Zetsu seemed to be injected with stimulants or had a berserk spell cast on them. They roared and scrambled desperately towards Liang Yue even when attacked by nearby shinobi or when weapons were about to strike. They seemed oblivious. This sudden change caught the allied shinobi forces off guard. For a moment, nearly half of the shinobi from various villages forgot to attack and simply watched as the white Zetsu rushed towards them, uttering strange cries. Some darted along the ground, others leaped through the air, some were empty-handed, others wielded wooden spikes. In just a few breaths, they had filled his vision. Is it because of Black Zetsu's influence? Or did Obito behind them realize something? While Liang Yue was pondering this, his hands didn't slow down at all. With a flip of his palms, 2 iridium short swords immediately fell from his wide sleeves with the sharp blades in hand. Liang Yue immediately entered battle mode. The army of white Zetsu that was swarming in from all directions seemed overwhelming and fierce, but whenever they squeezed within 20 meters of Liang Yue, they were almost invariably cut to pieces by the sword light. The invisible golden blade was like a sharp knife cutting through butter. Although they seemed unequal in number, there was a fundamental difference between them. In an instant, wherever the golden light passed, white severed limbs and various soft, fragmented pieces were scattered in the blink of an eye. A large area around Liang Yue was covered with a wall made up of the broken bodies of white Zetsu. However, This tragic loss didn't seem to deter their animosity towards Liang Yue like moths to a flame. They continued to charge and leap from all directions, swarming in as if packed together. The allied shinobi forces, who had been fiercely fighting them, were now reduced to spectators. However, some leaders in the allied forces quickly reacted and immediately called out to the somewhat dazed shinobi to take the opportunity to reduce the number of white zetsu on the periphery. Several shinobi belonging to the Leaf Village initially wanted to rush up and reinforce Liang Yue, but eventually found that they couldn't intervene. The erratic sword light was a deadly harvester for the white zetsu, but it was the same for the shinobi. Rushing forward rashly would not only increase the chance of accidental injury but might also distract Hyuga Chunkyu in the center of the battle. Therefore, on the battlefield at this time, besides Liang Yue, who suddenly attracted the enemy's firepower, only the reanimated shinobi of past generations were still entangled in a stalemate with the allied forces. Bladestorm, after a moment, while calmly slaying the white zetsu coming from all directions and constantly observing the battlefield situation with his divine sense, Liang Yue, after noticing the change in the number of white zetsu in the field, decisively unleashed a powerful move. Intending to use this self-created technique as a finale to eliminate the remaining enemies, as Liang Yue likely shouted, a golden tornado was once again displayed on the land of the shinobi world. Wherever the continuous golden light passed, whether it was white zetsu, trees, branches, grass, or even the earth and stones, everything swept by it was turned into fine fragments and dust. Under the convolution of this rapid sword light, the violent winds between heaven and earth began to converge fiercely. In an instant, dust rose, earth mist filled the air, sand and stones flew, and various sharp sounds echoed around the area within nearly 100 meters. Centered on Liang Yue began to fall into a dim state, layered upon layered. With only the dazzling golden light as the only brilliance invisibly, a force of inward suction suddenly arose, attracting everything around to the center. Whether in the air or on the ground, a large number of white zetsu began to be involuntarily drawn into the center of the storm, and then wiped out by the indestructible golden light. Unlike the last time he used this blade storm, although Liang Yue had also used it to fight a more powerful pain, it was a pity that there were no spectators at the time. Although the high-level members of the Leaf Village knew that Liang Yue had dealt with the 6 paths of pain controlled by the Rinnegan alone, they hadn't had time to inquire in detail about how he did it. Due to the sudden changes and chaos in recent times, not to mention the shinobi from other villages, their understanding of Hyuga Chunkyu, the newly emerging genius of the Leaf Village in recent years, had always remained at the level that this guy was good at developing ninjutsu, and the practicality was very strong, including the well-known Leaf Village's attraction technique, spirit arrow technique, the little-known sword light, and even the so-called immortal arts suitable for human cultivation, which only a very few people have noticed, and so on. But Liang Yue's specific strength has always been a mystery to most people. Now they finally had the opportunity to see someone's true face, amazing, worthy of being the Leaf Village's super genius. Is that golden light the sword light? It's really strong, to be able to continuously output for such a long time without showing obvious signs of exhaustion. Could it be that this sword light is not ninjutsu? It's indeed worth studying. This sword light, coupled with taijutsu, is simply impeccable. Yes, if our own country could also obtain this cultivation method, you're dreaming. Even in our Leaf Village, few people have learned this power. Yes, I heard that only their Hyuga family's second young lady has ever shown this golden light in front of people. No, it is said that there is also a Leaf Village rogue ninja who can use this power, and it seems to be Uchiha. You, damn it. You actually planted spies in our Leaf Village. Such important information. You say that as if you don't have any. We're all in the same boat. Damn, looking at the moves used by that Hyuga Chunkyu, it seems to be derived from their family's gentle fist secret technique, rotation. Indeed, there is a shadow of that move, but rotation is an all-around defensive secret technique, but now it is more aggressive. The key lies in that sword light. If we could learn it. Uchiha who defected from the village? Chapter 388, Yin Yang seeking the Tao Jade. As the last batch of white zetsu fearlessly plunged into the vast dust cloud and were torn apart by the sword light, Liang Yue immediately stopped outputting power. In an instant, the golden light retracted, disappearing without a trace, and the originally violent whirlwind also lost its origin, turning into a rootless duckweed and slowly calming down. Liang Yue, at this moment, supported his forehead with one hand, gently rubbing his scalp, dissolving the discomfort caused by the previous rapid rotation. At the same time, this guy didn't relax just because the white zetsu disappeared. In fact, at this moment, he was even more vigilant than before just now, for no apparent reason. A sense of crisis suddenly began to pervade his heart, and as time went on, this feeling was gradually becoming clearer and more distinct. A backup plan, that's right, that Obito guy has suffered losses at my hands several times in a row. In his heart, I'm afraid I've long become a thorn that must be removed. A batch of white Zetsu really can't accomplish much soon. Under Liang Yue's keen innate divine sense, the source of the sense of crisis lingering in his heart began to appear at this moment. As the surrounding dust slowly settled, a white membrane became increasingly clear. Upon closer inspection, it was actually composed of large patches of shattered white Zetsu corpses, remnants, and debris. It floated so lightly in all directions, not falling with the dust, and from a distance, it looked like a blurred ball, surrounding him. And from Liang Yue's Byakugan perspective, these white Zetsu remains were emitting a chakra of the same attribute, and gradually, as if substantial, they fused together and connected as one. It seemed that they were trying to trap him firmly in the center. Earth attribute, mutated chakra, looks a bit familiar. In addition, this chakra seems to be filled with a dull sense of explosion, like a volcano about to erupt. That's it, this must be Dieter's doing. Explosion is art, huh? Soon, in Liang Yue's random thoughts, the surrounding white Zetsu, originally as fine as dust, finally condensed together, forming a chubby, elastic meatball. And at this moment, inside this white ball, directly in front of Liang Yue's vision, a transparent vortex like a sewer suddenly appeared in the void. Immediately afterwards, amid a distortion, Obito and Deidara appeared from the vortex as expected. It's these two guys looking at the two people not far away. Liang Yue wasn't in a hurry to attack after all, having experienced several confrontations before, since Obito still dared to appear in front of him at this time. It meant that he had made thorough preparations. At least he had prepared a backup plan to retreat safely at any time. Frankly speaking, Kamui, a bug-like ability, was indeed troublesome, and it seemed that, in addition to the inside of the Kamui space, Obito might also have some spare Sharingan stored in other places. As for Deidara, he was originally a deceased person revived by impure world reincarnation, possessing immortality to a certain extent. An ordinary ninjutsu is difficult to inflict effective damage on him. Of course, if it was Liang Yue, it wouldn't be difficult to eliminate him. I originally just wanted to capture Kinkaku and Jinkaku for experiments, and now Deidara has popped up. Then I'll just take him away as well. While his thoughts were racing, the two people opposite him also made their moves. Among them, Deidara was looking at him with an excited expression, his black eyes seeming to glow, his body slightly bent, and his hands clasped together in the impure world reincarnation state. This explosion maniac with nearly infinite chakra was now fully mobilizing the energy in his body, echoing the thick white Zetsu sphere around him. Even eye contact didn't occur, without the slightest hesitation. Presumably, in his understanding, he might not be optimistic about Deidara's operation this time. After all, it wasn't a secret in the entire ninja world that Liang Yue could use the Flying Thunder God technique. As someone who had personally experienced the power of the Flying Thunder God technique, Obito naturally understood the powerful mobility it brought. Hyuga Shunkyu, is it? I heard you're very strong. Are you interested in witnessing my art? Without any nonsense, Deidara was rapidly forming hand seals with both hands, while grinning and looking at him with a ferocious expression. Not interested. Saying that, Liang Yue also simply circulated the spiritual power in his body and began to inject it into his Byakugan. Hohathoha. It's not up to you. My current body can unreservedly display eternal art in the ninja world, so please enjoy it properly. Accompanying Deidara's almost insane excitement, the surrounding white ball began to twist violently like a screen full of gradually boiling water. It roared and quickly contracted inward, and the thick flesh wall began to bloom with large swaths of dazzling light. From the Byakugan's perspective, the heavy mutated earth attribute chakra also began to react violently. They condensed with each other, and a huge heat was about to burst out. Seeing this, Liang Yue, who understood the plot of Naruto, naturally understood the other party's plan, so he showed his own means. At this moment, he had quietly put on a Saiyan green spiritual power code and entered the Tensigan state. Then, one palm stretched out flat to the sky, 5 fingers separated, and a glowing green ball suddenly emerged out of thin air. In an instant, an indescribable attraction suddenly occurred in his palm, different from the physical external forces such as almighty push and planetary devastation. This was a special suction force that only acted on the energy level, perhaps because he hadn't been able to completely enter the 6 paths level and could only rely on the accumulation of pure energy to briefly sublimate the Byakugan. Liang Yue couldn't figure out what kind of principle this was. He only knew that after entering the Tensigan mode, He seemed to naturally possess this control over chakra. It was like the absolute control of the upper-level energy over the lower-level one. With just a thought, the massive amount of mutated earth attribute chakra in all directions, which was originally at the critical point of eruption, instantly returned to silence and changed their mode of movement. In the next moment, they flew out of the thick white Zetsa flesh wall like swallows returning to their nests, like all rivers returning to the sea, and quickly condensed on Liang Yue's palm. Even more exaggerated was that, in this short process, these chakras, which were forcibly plundered, had also transformed from the original mutated earth attribute into a non-attribute one. Moreover, in terms of quality, it was even several times higher than before. Subsequently, as Deidara on the opposite side stared blankly in a daze, Liang Yue gently threw these chakras behind him. In an instant, the large amount of energy transformed into 9 black yin-yang seeking truth balls, suspended behind his head just like the halo behind a god in legends. They slowly rotated with Liang Yue's will. Chapter 389 The Divine Word. Truth-seeking ball, yin-yang release. Both of these, in theory, are powers that can only be used after a cultivator of the ninja system reaches the 6 paths level. In Liang Yue's understanding, the so-called 6 paths level should correspond to the foundation establishment stage in the cultivation world. In the current ninja world, it is almost impossible to achieve this through normal cultivation. After all, before he appeared, the ninjas here didn't even know the concept of the innate realm. However, nothing is absolute, and there will always be some exceptional individuals in the world, even for some people with special bloodlines. In addition to directly advancing through cheats, they can also master some powers in advance through alternative methods, just like the sword or in martial arts, the inviting gods in immortal arts, and the divine arts in magic. After Liang Yue possessed the Hyuga clan's bloodline, he could naturally use some of the power belonging to higher level in advance through the secrets of the Otsutsuki clan. Since it is a higher level of power, it naturally has a natural dominance over its lower level ninjutsu, just as described in the original plot. Although the impure world reincarnation has a bug-like effect, allowing the reincarnated person to have almost infinite chakra and infinite self-healing ability, etc. Unless the caster actively removes the reincarnated person's ninjutsu summoning ritual, it is almost unsolvable. But when it faces power from a higher level yin-yang release, it is completely restrained. At this moment, as Liang Yue's thoughts moved, a black ball behind him suddenly shot out towards Deidara, extremely fast. Deidara, still immersed in the previous situation and a little dazed, subconsciously wanted to dodge when he saw this. Unfortunately, silently, outside his body, there seemed to be an invisible and intangible obstacle that was the effect of the wood leaf attraction technique simplified by Liang Yue through several elementary cultivation techniques and the everlasting spring technique. Although this force is not very strong, it also played a good role at this critical moment of defending and attacking the enemy. In the blink of an eye, the black ball slammed into Deidara's body and then merged into his body. Then, a layer of decay began to spread rapidly from the position of the wound to the surroundings, and in just one breath, it corroded the body of this explosion maniac. So, at the moment when the opponent's body turned into ashes, he, who had been preparing for a long time, directly activated his hair control ability. As his mind moved, a few strands of hair, like silver whips, gently flicked, and had already crossed the distance between the two, binding the semi-transparent Deidara's soul that was about to fly away tightly. No matter how he struggled, he couldn't break free. Instead, the tighter he was bound, finally, he became like a silkworm chrysalis. After that, Liang Yue didn't stop, and jumped out of the collapsing white Zetsa flesh wall, ignoring the surrounding ninja coalition forces who were watching. After a few jumps, he came to another battlefield on the sea. Here, several elite ninjas were fighting fiercely with 2 impure world reincarnated people, but it seemed that they had already fallen into disadvantage. The 2 reincarnated people were dressed strangely, with horns on their heads, and they looked like the Gold and Silver brothers. These 2 brothers also held several special instruments in their hands, which should be the legendary 6 paths weapons. However, Liang Yue didn't like these counterfeit goods with the same names as the magic weapons in mythology at all, so he was too lazy to talk nonsense with them, and 2 black balls instantly flew out from behind, taking advantage of the cover of their fighting with each other, and after a few turns, they slammed into the bodies of the Gold and Silver brothers, one on the left and one on the right. Then, Liang Yue landed, accepted everyone's attention, hair whip entangled, flying thunder god teleported, all in one go. The scene changed, and this guy came to a secluded rocky beach. Okay, now that you have been captured by me, then let's talk less nonsense. I ask your answer, and after the transaction is completed, I will let you return. Otherwise, Be prepared to accept my soul experiment at this time. Liang Yue sat leisurely on a relatively flat stone with his arms folded, and 3 soul bodies tied into zongzi were placed in front of him, drawn by him through the psychic ability newly awakened by the hair control ability. Liang Yue can naturally communicate with them through his mind. Then, let's start with you. Who summoned you? Where's he? Saying that, Liang Yue looked at one of the zongzi, which was tightly wrapped around Ita's soul. Kid, are you interrogating this grandpa? You've probably miscalculated, although it's a bit unpleasant to be reincarnated and forced to fight after dying. But with your current attitude, it's difficult for me to communicate with you. After listening to the other party's reply, Liang Yue didn't say much, and stretched out a palm towards the zongzi in front of him. Holy word technique. As Liang Yue's voice fell, a piece of brilliant radiance suddenly enveloped the zongzi. The rose gold color appeared extraordinarily sacred, and on the periphery of this radiance, there was also a circular light band engraved with mysterious characters, slowly rotating with the emergence of the radiance. At the moment when the sacred light enveloped him, the soul firmly bound by Liang Yue's white hair was suddenly hit hard, and let out a miserable wail. Immediately afterwards, Liang Yue saw a piece of invisible, translucent mist suddenly rising up, and penetrating out of the inside of the hair without hindrance. Vaguely, there seemed to be a distorted and painful face in the mist, but in the blink of an eye, it volatilized and dissipated into the air. At the same time, the psychic induction that Liang Yue originally connected with the other party through his hair also disappeared. It seems good luck, holy word technique, can really work on the soul. In fact, Liang Yue was not very sure before whether his trick from the legend system would work. After all, reality is not a game copy. And there are still many differences between the reincarnated person brought by the impure world reincarnation and the genuine undead creature. That's right, this holy word technique is one of the signature skills of the mage profession in the legend world. It is also one of the few game skills that Liang Yue has no intention of using to farm monsters and level up in the proper legend world. The effect of the holy word technique is to cause a one-hit kill to undead creatures. However, its effect probability is not like other skills, which take effect immediately after hitting, but depends on luck. Basically, the higher the skill level, the higher the probability of taking effect. But the problem is that, in the Legends series of game skills, except for Summon Divine Beast, which can be temporarily saved at level 7, the highest level of other skills is level 3 at least. The zombie mind copy in Liang Yue's stronghold world follows such a rule mechanism. This is naturally dispensable for him, who has always emphasized the efficiency of farming monsters and has countless skills that have not been practiced so until now. Liang Yue's holy word technique level still remains at level 1. If it weren't for the fact that he had to face the existence of impure world reincarnated people, he probably would have forgotten that there was such a skill. Chapter 390 Intelligence confirmed. However, compared to these impure world reincarnation users, Liang Yue's ultimate goal was naturally to eliminate Black Zetsu. After all, this was related to the success or failure of his main quest recently, or rather, since capturing Black Zetsu. Liang Yue had been constantly thinking about this problem. The holy word from the lineage of legendary mages was naturally included as one of the methods he could try. However, it was only one of them, and not the best solution he had envisioned in Liang Yue's mind. The real first choice was still to indirectly borrow the power of the system. After all, there was a successful case of this method before. Just like in the world of the Hobbit, Smaug, the last dragon in Middle-earth, was still unwilling to give up after being destroyed by Liang Yue. While his dragon soul was not extinguished, he entangled and eroded Arwen. Refusing to leave, Liang Yue took advantage of the system's contract rules to easily obliterate Smaug's soul and smoothly bring Arwen, the beautiful and noble elven princess, under his wing. Now, as he faced Black Zetsu again, a species that seemed similar but possessed the ability to possess and erode the will of others, he naturally turned his attention to the system again. In his vision, Liang Yue only needed to find someone he liked and felt he could sign a contract with and bring out of the ninja world, then find a suitable time and place to arrange things a bit. At that time, he could repeat the trick, kill 2 birds with 1 stone, and achieve a win-win situation. Would that be wonderful? Now it's your turn. How about it? Are you willing to cooperate? While his mind was racing, after dealing with Itra, Liang Yue turned his gaze to the gold and silver brothers next to him. Although these two were currently wrapped in thick strands of hair, making it impossible to see their expressions with the naked eye, Liang Yue could still clearly feel their soul emotions through the telepathic ability controlled by the hair. Unease, shock, and even a hint of fear. How is the soul of the junior just now? After hesitating for a while, a slightly hesitant voice came from one of the zongzi wrapped in gold. I don't know. To be honest, This is the first time I've used methods on someone's soul. Maybe he has returned to the underworld, but it is also possible that he has been annihilated after all. His screams before leaving were a bit miserable as he said this. Liang Yue's gaze towards the two brothers suddenly took on a playful look. I don't know what will happen to you next. A careful analysis of the gold and silver brothers reveals that these two are actually a bit simple-minded, and then willful, extreme, and not even in order to survive. Even in the belly of the Nine Tails, they could feed on the bodies of the tailed beasts. After obtaining the Nine Tails chakra, they began to become arrogant because they lost the war and were dissatisfied with the village signing a humiliating peace treaty with Konoha. They launched a coup, killing the second Raikage and the second Hokage one after another, but these two did not escape the fate of death in the end. As a result, the strength of Cloud Hidden Village and Konoha both declined, and in the end, no one benefited. Typically, they did things without considering the consequences. However, no matter what the personalities of these two brothers were before, now that they had seen the example of the past and faced the risk of even their souls being obliterated, the Gold and Silver brothers finally chose to compromise. After obtaining the information he wanted, Liang Yue did not make things difficult for them and released the hair that bound them. Very simply then, the souls of these two brothers seemed to be summoned by something and disappeared in an instant. Liang Yue himself took the obtained information and used Flying Thunder God to teleport several times, returning to the third squad where Jiraiya and others were located. As for whether the information given by the Gold and Silver brothers was falsified, Liang Yue was not worried about this. It was actually quite difficult to lie in a soul state, especially since Liang Yue was in a direct telepathic state with these two before. Able to feel the fluctuations of the other party's soul through his hair. Telepathy is a very special way of communication, subtle and sensitive, with the enemy being weak and himself being strong. Liang Yue could be said to have taken full advantage. Once there was a problem with the authenticity of the information given by the other party, he would immediately notice the abnormality. So, the authenticity of this information should be no problem. Yes, speaking of which, this is the first time I've learned that you, Chunky, actually have the ability to communicate telepathically with soul bodies. Is this also a kind of say dart, or is it unique to your spiritual body of lightning, fire, and wood? Still on that empty field, Jiraiya, who had obtained the exact information, was obviously relieved at this time, and the whole person began to cheer up, looking like he was eager to start a big fight. Obviously, the running around and searching for a needle in a haystack during this period had severely worn down the old guy's patience. However, in addition to joy, Jiraiya seemed to be full of curiosity about Liang Yue's newly exposed ability in his heart. No, this ability to communicate telepathically with hair should originate from the bloodline of our Hyuga family. This is probably similar to the human path under the control of the Rinnegan. That ability to strip the opponent's soul and interrogate them is somewhat similar. Liang Yue had already thought of a reason on the way when Jiraiya asked the question. This was naturally something he made up casually. However, if you want a lie to become more credible, the best way is undoubtedly to tell the truth. Half-truth. Legend has it that 9 parts truth plus 1 part lie is the best matching ratio here. Anyway, the human path and the 6 paths puppets really has the ability to interrogate other people's souls, and the abilities of the Rinnegan and Tenseigan both come from the bloodline of Otsutsuki. However, although the bloodline power of the Otsutsuki clan is similar, it is diverse if you look closely. Therefore, even from the root, the answer given by Liang Yue is mostly indistinguishable and difficult to investigate. It is still like this among the same clan, let alone Jiraiya, an outsider. Chapter 391 Successful Rescue. Does it come from bloodline? How enviable! After hearing Liang Yue's reply, Jiraiya didn't feel anything was wrong. Then, he directly changed the topic, gathered the other members of the third squad, and began to formulate a new rescue strategy. Soon, in about 5 or 6 minutes, a new plan was born naturally. The solution discussed in such a short period of time wouldn't be very brilliant. Rather than calling it a solution, it was more like an excuse Jiraiya gave to get rid of the other team members. The plan was simple: to have Liang Yue use his Flying Thunder God technique to take him straight to the target location, while the others could do whatever they were doing to this end. The old guy's reasons and justifications, although a bit cliché, seemed somewhat convincing. That was, while the information about the location was still valid, to rescue Orochimaru as soon as possible, eliminate the threat posed by the large number of impure world reincarnation users on the battlefield, and provide favorable assistance to the Allied forces' operations. I never thought that Obito would hide Orochimaru in the Land of Fire. According to the information provided by Jinkoku and Kenkoku, the person who summoned them from the Pure Land was indeed Orochimaru. In addition, Danzo also seemed to have died at Obito's hands. This was unexpected information. Therefore, Liang Yue speculated that Orochimaru might have been controlled by Obito using the powerful Genjutsu effect of Kidomatsukami. Although he found it surprising, it was also reasonable as for Danzo his life and death were irrelevant to Liang Yue, but with this guy's death, the Sharingan in his eye socket that could cast Kidomatsukami became a pure disaster. Orochimaru might just be the first victim. This was a troublesome matter. At this time, after several rounds of Flying Thunder God technique teleportation, Liang Yue and Jiraiya had arrived in the Land of Fire as they spoke. The two quickly passed through a forest and soon arrived in front of a ruin. This was the famous scenic spot in the Land of Fire that was destroyed by the Akatsuki organization. The Fire Temple. The head monk of this temple, Master Chiraku, once performed the 1,000-hand cannon in front of the temple gate, with considerable power. Unfortunately, he was eventually killed by Hiden and Kokuzu together. Nowadays, due to the complexity of various matters in the ninja world and the looming war, the Land of Fire had not yet had time to organize reconstruction efforts, so only ruins remained here. Through the Byakugan's clairvoyance, Liang Yue found Orochimaru's figure in a hidden chamber beneath the ruins of the Fire Temple. With little effort at this time, Orochimaru was meditating, looking calm and peaceful after being watched by Liang Yue's gaze. As a congenital level master, he felt something almost immediately and exchanged a glance with himself through the thick earth. Fortunately, Orochimaru did not choose a strategic retreat. In addition, Liang Yue also saw an unexpected figure in that underground chamber, Kabuto Sashahu. At this moment, an abnormal rustling of branches and leaves suddenly came from the forest in another direction from the two. Jiraiya showed a great sense of responsibility at this time. With an agile little jump, he stood in front of Liang Yue, with his hands on his hips, and a look of suppressed excitement on his old face. It seemed that the old guy had been bored to death recently and urgently needed a hearty battle to relieve his boredom. Unfortunately, after a brief standoff and silence, the person who jumped out of the dense canopy did not seem to be an enemy. Sasuke? And Itachi? Why are you two here? Seeing this, Jiraiya scratched his cheek in confusion and asked, his original look of excitement immediately disappearing compared to the development in the original plot. The current Sasuke was undoubtedly much more cheerful. Because of Liang Yue's intervention, a series of coincidences had caused his situation to deviate a lot. Now, Sasuke had not only personally killed his enemy, but also successfully resolved the misunderstanding with his brother. And it seemed that the two brothers had also reached a reconciliation. We also just got the information and learned that Orochimaru is here. Seeing this, Liang Yue stepped forward a few steps, past Jiraiya, and looked at the two with a smile. Is it Orochimaru? Did he defect from the village again? Sasuke asked with a surprised look upon hearing this. That's not the case. He should have been coerced or controlled. In this way, after a brief exchange of a few words, the two groups of people merged into one force, and soon found the entrance to the underground chamber under Liang Yue's leadership. As for the matter of rescuing Orochimaru next, it was almost all Itachi's solo performance in this secret room. There were actually only Orochimaru and Kabuto, and at first glance, it didn't look like they were being kidnapped. The truth was also similar to what they saw. After Obito obtained the Sharingan from Danzo that could activate Kidomatsukami, Orochimaru was easily controlled without any precautions. In the time that followed, Orochimaru had been working under the other party's command. Strictly speaking, after activating the impure world reincarnation, Orochimaru's status in Obito's eyes had begun to shrink infinitely, and he no longer had much value. After all, Obito's ultimate goal was only to create a world with only him and Rin. Orochimaru was just a tool he used to buy time, and he never intended to keep him for long. As for Jiraiya and the others, Kidomatsukami was indeed a very tricky ninjutsu. Among the known ninjutsu in the ninja world, it was often ranked at the top. Liang Yue might be able to passively immune to this ninjutsu because of his Byakugan, but if he wanted him to actively help others, it would probably be a bit difficult. Fortunately, all of this was not a problem for Itachi. The reason need not be said much. At this moment, he was keeping another Sharingan that could activate the Genjutsu Kidomatsukami. Soon, under Itachi's operation, Orochimaru returned to normal immediately afterwards. After adjusting his thoughts for a while, Orochimaru performed a series of impure world reincarnation cancellation techniques. Everything was so logical. Seeing Kabuto in the secret room turn into fly ash with a speechless expression, and finally even his soul disappeared, everyone secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Boom! At this moment, accompanied by an imperceptible tremor, a muffled explosion sounded in the distance, and wisps of dust rustled down. In fact, the sound was not loud, but it seemed low and powerful. Even through the thick layer of soil, it could not be isolated. Subconsciously, everyone looked at each other at this moment, and then quickly returned to the ground. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 392 The Decisive Battle is Coming. Accompanying it, a dazzling afterglow flashed across the sky, and the crowd had almost simultaneously stood on the tops of the tall trees surrounding the fire temple at this moment. A thick cloud of dust was spreading within a continuous range of hills that should have been at the end of their line of sight. A shockwave composed of airflow and dust was gradually enlarging in everyone's eyes, rapidly spreading in all directions, while swirling up large amounts of earth, rocks, and debris wherever it passed. Trees were broken, forests bowed, and the sound waves rolled in the end. Even Liang Yue and the others personally felt the tail end of the impact, with a strong wind blowing across their faces. A moment later, as the dust in the distance slowly settled, a scene of devastation was presented before everyone's eyes. The central area of the originally continuous hills now had an impact basin filled with ravines. What great power! The battle on the Allied forces' side is so intense. Ninjutsu shouldn't be able to achieve this effect. It's a tailed beast ball. Looking at the range of destruction in that area, it seems to be much larger than Konoha. This kind of power even the Nine Tails probably can't achieve it. So, the culprit behind this destruction is the Ten Tails? It seems we need to find some helpers amidst the crowd's involuntary sighs. Looking at the distant ruins, Orochimaru, who had been silent, suddenly wore a smile on his face. After licking his lips, he jumped off the treetop on his own accord. Sasuke, come over here for a moment. Is something the matter, teacher? Unlike the tense relationship in the original story, where they were ready to kill each other at any moment, Sasuke and Orochimaru now rarely retained a deep teacher-student bond. Liang Yue's intervention undoubtedly gave Orochimaru another option in his pursuit of immortality. Moreover, compared to the non-mainstream method of reincarnation, his method was undoubtedly more like a broad road. Therefore, during the days when he submitted to Snake Uncle, what remained in Sasuke's memory was more about this teacher's knowledge and earnest teachings. Therefore, now that he heard Orochimaru calling him, Sasuke didn't think otherwise and directly followed him down. As Sasuke moved, Itachi naturally wouldn't be idle, quickly following closely behind. That's right, facing such destructive power, the Allied forces do need some strong reinforcements. However, the impure world reincarnation requires suitable vessels, so Sasuke's body? Maybe someone secretly stuffed a few white zetsu into him. After considering it, in the end, Liang Yue did not choose to join in the fun. Firstly, after guessing the actions of those few people, he didn't plan to waste any more words with those three seniors. After all, they weren't familiar, and in his heart, he didn't have much admiration for those three Hokage. Furthermore, according to the induction in the contract, Liang Yue discovered that Little Kong was also on the battlefield at this moment, and his spirit was in a state of excitement. The specific location was the direction from which the tailed beast ball had come earlier. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. After slightly judging the direction of the battlefield, Liang Yue immediately entered a continuous space transfer mode. However, the spiritual power he used to activate the Flying Thunder God technique was naturally not infinite. Although Liang Yue had successfully advanced to the 13th level of key training, his spiritual power reserves were abundant, but the consumption was still very large. Therefore, in the few stops before he sensed that he was about to reach the battlefield, he also successively separated two shadow clones, instructing them to hide in quiet corners to cultivate and accumulate spiritual power, in case of emergency. In this way, Liang Yue, who felt that he was fully prepared, once again activated the Flying Thunder God technique, with a coordinate system being a fairy character special cune he placed on Hinata. Whoosh. Along with the fleeting images in front of him, Liang Yue finally arrived at the battlefield while still falling in midair. He used the Byakugan's all-round vision to take in the surrounding scenery. The timing of my arrival seems a bit delicate. At this moment, the situation in the field seemed to have reached the decisive moment, with a large number of allied shinobi forces lined up in neat formations, confronting the 10 Tails, the 8 Tails, the 9 Tails Jinchuriki, the cage-level powerhouses of each village, and the shadows stood in the front row on the back of the 10 Tails. Obito was still wearing that iconic swirl mask, carrying a large fan on his back, and standing there with a tube inserted on the side of the battlefield. Little Kong was fighting at full strength with Uchiha, who had activated a 3-stage complete body Susanoo, relying on the Beeman Warbeast's swift and flexible movements, powerful strength, and near-perfect combat awareness. He constantly circled around the huge blue Susanoo, sometimes leaping to dodge, sometimes wandering to attack, sometimes clinging to its body, With all 4 feet moving, every claw strike was sure to take away a large piece of the shattered Susanoo armor, no matter how you looked at it. Little Kong was currently on the side that had the advantage in this duel. Unfortunately, the Uchiha who was using the Susanoo was currently in an impure world reincarnation state, and theoretically, he could have an almost infinite amount of chakra. Therefore, he didn't care about this consumption at all. Basically, no matter how much Susanoo armor Little Kong tore off, the other party could replenish it in the blink of an eye. Occasionally, in times of crisis, when Little Kong was about to penetrate the Susanoo, the other party could also timely slash out a few knives, forcing Little Kong back through the Byakugan's visual observation. Liang Yue discovered that the Uchiha who was holding his arms and looking composed should be Madara himself. Logically speaking, as the biggest conspiracy planner in the ninja world after Black Zetsu was captured by him, Madara would naturally not be content with such a passive situation. Although Little Kong's own combat ability was very strong, according to Liang Yue's own estimate, the little guy was at most a little stronger than the 8 tails, and basically on par with the 9 tails for Madara. It wasn't enough to be unable to fight back all the time. Obviously, this was the other party doing it on purpose. Combining this with a plot development in the original story, Liang Yue immediately understood the other party's plan. Is this planning to wait for an opportunity to act, dragging on until the moment when the situation changes? Those Rinnegan are the goal of this master, but unfortunately, the eyes are still on Obito's body. These two are just superficially cooperating, temporarily working together, but their ultimate goals are difficult to agree on. However, if Madara still wants to achieve the situation in the original plot, and have everything under control, he must first revive himself. Now that Black Zetsu has been sealed by me, how will he break the situation? In an instant, these thoughts flashed through Liang Yue's mind like lightning after landing. Although Liang Yue really wanted to rush over as soon as possible to help Little Kong solve Madara, who was not in his full state, unfortunately, the current timing was really not right, because at this moment, directly opposite the allied shinobi forces, another tailed beast ball with a full amount of power had been accumulated. Roar, along with a sharp roar, between the 10 ugly tails dancing wildly, it was directly sprayed towards the allied forces' position. Chapter 393, A Close Call. That was a massive energy ball as dazzling as the sun. Wherever it passed, it swept away everything in its path. Soil and rocks collapsed, and even the earth was plowed into a deep scar, accompanied by a powerful and roaring airflow. That was a kind of power far beyond what humans could achieve, and it would not be an exaggeration to call it a natural disaster. Faced with such a scene of impending destruction, something called fear began to grow rapidly within the ranks of the allied shinobi forces, and it was written all over their faces. Wherever Liang Yue looked, almost everyone's face was contorted in terror. Liang Yue didn't know if this was the scene from the original plot, where many ninjas temporarily abandoned the boundaries between ninja villages, jointly learned a ninjutsu, and worked together to create hundreds of earth walls in front of the battle formation, which were then undoubtedly destroyed by the tailed beast ball. If so, then the current situation might be a bit bad, because according to the timeline, Orochimaru's eternal sister might not be able to catch up with this tailed beast ball. Looks like it's my turn to take action this time. Gently patting Hinata's delicate shoulder beside him, Liang Yue then turned his sleeve over, and a sage kunai instantly appeared in his palm with a forceful throw. The kunai immediately turned into a line of black light, flying towards the upper right of the front of the allied shinobi forces. Immediately afterwards, Liang Yue's figure flashed and disappeared, leaving only a faint spiral airflow in place. When he reappeared, he had already arrived 200 or 300 meters above and in front of the allied forces, holding the special kunai in his hand again, overlooking the entire situation of the battlefield. At this moment, the tailed beast ball on the opposite side was indeed as expected, rampaging and unstoppable, in the blink of an eye. It had already crossed nearly half of the physical distance to the allied forces. Wherever it passed, the layers of earth walls blocking its path could hardly cause it the slightest bit of obstruction. It could be seen how insignificant the defensive effect based on quantity was in the face of absolute power. The 10 tails on the opposite side had also clearly exceeded the level of the highest combat power in the allied shinobi forces at this time. Fortunately, I arrived in time. If I had gone to watch the excitement with Jiraiya and the others before, these people below would probably be done for. While pondering in his mind, Liang Yue's movements were not slow at all. Between the turns of his wrist, the sage kunai in his palm flew out again. Speed like lightning. The direction pointed directly at the 10 tails on the opposite side, and Obito standing on its back at the same time. Liang Yue turned his sleeve over again. Another sage kunai appeared in his palm immediately afterwards. He saw his body using the force of the kunai he had thrown earlier, and with a graceful spin, he instantly threw the kunai in his hand. The direction was towards the tailed beast ball that was flying rapidly towards him. In the process, the entire action was as smooth as flowing water, completed in one go. Immediately afterwards, along with that almost stagnant free fall, Liang Yue's hands began to form seals rapidly in the blink of an eye. He completed a very unique Flying Thunder God technique. This is precisely in recent years Liang Yue's painstaking efforts, the result of his dedicated research. Simply put, this ninjutsu can be seen as a variant of the Flying Thunder God technique. Its function is to spatially exchange the positions of two objects, or to transfer them unilaterally, so that the effect of the Flying Thunder God technique is no longer limited to the caster himself. However, the necessary conditions for its execution are that the formula of the Flying Thunder God needs to be engraved on the object to be moved in advance. Upon closer thought, this variant of the Flying Thunder God seems to be very similar to Sasuke's bloodline ability after opening the Rinnegan Amenita Jikara, the hand power, but the advantage is that as long as the caster's chakra reserves are sufficient, its range of effect is almost equal to the limit movement distance of the Flying Thunder God technique. From this point of view, it should be a bit stronger than Amenita Jikara. Just like that, accompanied by a flash of lightning like Operation the Tailed Beast Ball, which had originally broken through most of the earth walls in front of the allied shinobi forces with an unstoppable momentum, and was about to crash into the military formation, suddenly disappeared in the blink of an eye. The whole process was like a dream bubble. This sudden turning point immediately frightened a considerable number of ninjas in the allied forces, and they collapsed to the ground on the spot. Boom! Immediately afterwards, a violent explosion suddenly erupted in front of the allied forces. The huge sound seemed to shatter the space, frightening many ninjas in the formation, all shivering. That scene was magnificent, dazzling, like a meteor falling to the ground. Upon closer inspection, the location of the explosion seemed to be where the 10 tails and Obito were before. Soon after this discovery, a sense of relief after surviving a disaster, combined with the unexpected joy, suddenly began to sprout from the hearts of the allied forces ninjas. Soon, accompanied by the ensuing shock wave, Liang Yue's figure slowly landed in front of the allied forces, standing side by side with Tsunade and the cage of the other 4 great ninja villages, and on his other side were Killer Bee of the 8 Tails, with his Jinchuriki state fully activated, and Naruto of the 9 Tails. It seems that your third squad's mission was completed well this time. The instant reversal of the current situation made Tsunade couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. In addition to the surprise in her heart, she also crossed her arms and looked at Liang Yue next to her with a smile at the corner of her mouth. However, in the next moment, a trace of imperceptible hesitation appeared on Tsunade's face, and she condensed her chakra into a line and quietly asked him, "How is that Orochimaru guy doing? And where's Jiraiya? Why didn't he come with you?" The information that has now been confirmed is that Denzo died at the hands of Obito, and the Mangekyou Sharingan that can cast Kido Matsukami fell into Obito's hands, and then Obito used Kido Matsukami to control Orochimaru. Fortunately, however, the matter has been resolved perfectly. Upon hearing this, Liang Yue transmitted what he knew to Tsunade. "How did you guys break Kido Matsukami?" Upon hearing this, Tsunade's heart suddenly eased, but she also became curious. After all, as the princess of Konoha, she had long heard about Kido Matsukami, a genjutsu that could be called a bug-level technique. Some information about its weaknesses was definitely more detailed than what most ninjas knew. This matter is actually thanks to Itachi and Sasuke. When we arrived at Orochimaru's hiding place, these brothers also happened to arrive there. Itachi just happened to have another Mangekyou Sharingan that could cast Kido Matsukami on him, but after seeing the power of that tailed beast ball of the 10 tails before, Orochimaru felt that it was necessary to gather some more helpers, and they should already be on their way now. I see. Chapter 394, Making Trouble. With the tailed beast ball being transferred, the atmosphere of despair and tragedy that had originally filled the allied shinobi forces seemed to gradually recede, and everyone became much more relaxed. However, Liang Yue would not let his guard down at this time, because he understood that the enemy in front of him would not be so easily destroyed. There's no need to say much about Obito. Possessing a near misunderstood bug ability like Kamui, it's almost impossible to destroy him cleanly. In the original plot, it was Obito himself who felt that the time was ripe, so he took off the Mangekyou Sharingan with Kamui and equipped himself with a pair of Sharingan that were more powerful but not original. And then everyone had a chance to take advantage of it. First, there was Naruto's near unsolvable talk no jutsu, which could be called a director's script arrangement, and then his old man, Eternal Waistcoat, with a Flying Thunder God / finally, there was Black Zetsu, This old schemer, who seized the opportunity to consume Obito's own vitality to revive Madara, who was watching the battle nearby of course. Before that, Kakashi's other Kamui main Gekio also played a significant role. It's just unknown whether it can still take on the important task under the current situation. As for the Ten Tails, according to the settings in the original plot, it wouldn't die even if it ate its own tailed beast ball, although it would be injured. It wouldn't be a big problem. The explosion in the distance still seemed extremely intense, and the rolling red energy, like scattered clouds, accumulated with dust and sand, constantly impacting in all directions. That scene was very much like a coastline experiencing a Category 12 typhoon raging through. Faced with this level of impact, many people in the Allied forces unconsciously began to run chakra to shield themselves. Liang Yue calmly put on a golden light shield for himself, his Byakugan staring unblinkingly at the situation on the opposite side, not willing to let go of the slightest detail secretly. Even the Eye of Truth skill, newly obtained from the Wind Phantom Dragon template, was put to use. In fact, although Liang Yue at this time seemed calm on the surface, in his heart, he was rapidly planning another matter. Excitement, contradiction, and a trace of apprehension were the most real portrayals of what existed in this guy's heart at this moment. Hey Chunkyu, has your third squad's mission been completed yet? At this moment, Naruto, who was topped with a layer of orange-yellow Nine-Tails chakra mode, suddenly turned his gaze over and asked him in a low voice. His words seemed to carry a bit of hope. It was just completed, and then we rushed here without stopping. Hearing this, Liang Yue could probably guess what he wanted to ask. Nothing more than the matters of Jiraiya and Sasuke. The former was his teacher, and the latter was his close friend. In the original plot, they ran through the entire Naruto storyline, and the two had a great influence on Naruto's life trajectory during the process of Liang Yue performing missions before. Whenever he flew over to exchange information with Tsunade, this little yellow-haired kid would always pull him and ask questions non-stop. That is Jiraiya-sensei alright? Also, is there any news from Sasuke's side? As expected, everything is going smoothly. Sasuke and Itachi also helped a lot in rescuing Orochimaru this time. They should already be on their way here now. Kakashi was sent by me to stop Obito before. Now, if he's still alive, he should have already entered that Kamui space, right? Tsunade didn't hide anything from Liang Yue at this time and replied. However, from her words, Liang Yue also heard a bit of uncertainty and worry. Obviously, according to normal succession and ranking, Kakashi was undoubtedly the best choice for the next Hokage. If he died prematurely, it would definitely be a major loss for Konoha. Is that so? Liang Yue didn't have anything to worry about this after all, according to the development logic in the original plot. The main reason why Obito hadn't put on those two Rinnegan yet was because Madara had left a backup plan in his body that was said to be a very magical seal, planted on Obito's heart, which could be used to remotely control the body and behavior of the person being sealed. Moreover, as the party being planted with a seal, Obito himself could not actively remove it, not even suicide. In the original plot, Obito indirectly got rid of this restraint through a fateful duel with Kakashi, where his heart was pierced by the other party. Therefore, before completing this duel, it was unlikely that Obito would do anything to Kakashi. Looking at it this way, the plot matches up and the time should be about the same. Thinking of this, Liang Yue's heart moved, and he quietly exhaled a breath of stale air. In the next moment, a dazzling emerald color suddenly bloomed in those pale purple eyes. Two clusters of cyan-light flames ignited again from his eye sockets, covering his entire body in the blink of an eye amidst the scattering of astral winds. Just as the Tensegan mode was activated again, Liang Yue suddenly stopped on the ground, and his whole person instantly plunged into the turbulent dust and mist in front. Whoosh! In the dimness, a huge and scarlet eye opened at this moment. Immediately afterwards, accompanied by a short whooshing sound, a thick black shadow instantly pierced through the dust and mist, striking towards Liang Yue, who was flying. That was precisely one of the tails that was originally hanging high behind the 10 tails. However, Liang Yue was not surprised by this. Whether it was his Byakugan or the divine sense that had already spread out, they had all captured its every move gracefully. Liang Yue did a smooth side flip in midair, dodging just right. At the same time, he stomped down again. The originally empty space beneath him suddenly and inexplicably added a shining light screen, helping him adjust his flight trajectory. At the same time, his flying speed also increased several times. In just a blink of an eye, Liang Yue drilled out of the thick dust and mist and landed on the 10 tails huge back in his line of sight. Obito on the opposite side, seeing him arrive, seemed too lazy to say anything more. Facing Liang Yue, an opponent who had killed him several times, in the next moment, He very calmly pulled out the pipes behind him that were connected to the Ten-Tails body, and drifted into the Kamui space HMPH in the air. Only a slightly contemptuous cold hum remained that seemed to be a sign that he was not optimistic about Liang Yue's next duel with the Ten-Tails. Looking back at the Ten-Tails at this time, it seemed very calm. The tail that was originally struck out, like a 1,000-year-old tree, had now been retracted, slowly dancing in midair with the other 9. However, the Ten-Tails was not in a hurry to deal with him now. It was unknown whether it was out of curiosity about him or because it was confident and planned to strike later. Seeing this, Liang Yue suddenly curved the corners of his mouth and grinned his back molars at the thing under him. All right, since you're not reacting, then let me make the first move. Let me tell you in advance, after my move, you might be weakened very badly. Chapter 395 Parasitic Fetus. Snap, accompanied by a crisp slap. Liang Yue suddenly brought his hands together, his expression solemn, just like when he was casting planetary devastation before. However, the ninjutsu Liang Yue was about to use this time was not planetary devastation, but an original technique that he had painstakingly researched and developed over the years, combined with his own characteristics. Parasitic embryo seed. With a faint murmur, Liang Yue slowly separated his originally closed palms, revealing a touch of emerald green in the middle. It was a seed about the size of a walnut, with a restrained brilliance. Its entire body was like a drop of water, presenting a translucent color, and once it appeared, it floated in front of his chest. Upon closer inspection, it seemed to contain a vortex-shaped energy tied like a Chinese knot, constantly flowing within according to a specific trajectory, forming a self-sustaining cycle. Thump thump. At first, it was very weak, but as time went on, it quickly became like a war drum, resounding around, until the surrounding air was buzzing. And with the change of this sound, this originally inconspicuous emerald green seed actually began to beat like it was alive. Huff. Looking at the seed in front of him that was expanding and contracting like a heart, Liang Yue exhaled a breath of turbid air, and a few expectations flashed in his eyes. Involuntarily entrusted with my years of hard work and planning. Whether it can succeed depends on fate. Hey! With a soft shout, Liang Yue quickly squatted down and pressed his palms heavily on the back of the Ten-Tails beneath him. The seed that was originally suspended between his palms also fell down and merged into the body of the Ten-Tails without any hindrance. Thump thump. Almost in the next moment, a muffled rhythm began to sound from within the Ten-Tails. With the transmission of this sound, the thick fleshy wall and hard fur beneath Liang Yue began to tremble. A ripple seemed to ripple, spreading rapidly from the position where the seed fell, using the huge body of the Ten-Tails as a medium. Under the Tensigen mode, Liang Yue could clearly observe a different kind of disorder in the huge chakra aggregate below him through his vision. Thump thump, accompanied by the seemingly harmless beating and rhythmic sound. A chaotic phenomenon that was different from the initial operating mode appeared in the body of the Ten-Tails, causing its original stable internal structure to begin to show a trend of differentiation. Moreover, as time went on, the two energy operating modes began to gradually compete with each other. If this is an uncontrollable disorder for the Ten-Tails, then for Liang Yue, it is what he likes to see. It really works, using the method of cultivation to disturb chakra energy, although the two cannot be directly converted. Judging from the current impact, optimistically estimated at least it can weaken the Ten-Tails by half. Now, it's up to you. Lightning Firewood. In a flash of thought, the innate image of lightning firewood, which had been rubbed and explored for many years, suddenly propped up from behind him in Liang Yue's eyes. Compared with when he first got it, the current lightning firewood image is already completely different. The sprout that was originally born in the scorched dead wood has now grown into a vibrant small tree, and its size alone is much taller than Liang Yue. The whole body presents a cyan gold color, and the branches and leaves are luxuriant. From a distance, it looks like a multi-towered canopy umbrella, covering his whole person below, and the heavenly thunder and heavenly fire that were originally entwined on the sapling now seem to have reached a perfect harmonious symbiosis with the small tree. Moreover, with Liang Yue's almost uninterrupted spiritual power supply over the years, the original bright blue lightning has evolved into a light purple, and the orange-yellow flame has now become a fiery red. At this moment, the thunder and fire have escaped the past's jumpiness and unrestrainedness, and have hidden into the cyan gold small tree. However, this concealment is not a dissolution and disintegration, but a symbiosis within this composite innate image in another form. Whenever the body of the lightning firewood gently sways and the branches and leaves rub against each other, countless flames and electric arcs will inadvertently burst out from it, accompanied by the light chirping of thunder and fire. The brilliance of that tree will instantly render the surroundings as bright as brilliance. While pleasing to the eye, it is even more awe-inspiring. Of course, The so-called lightning firewood, as the name suggests, wood is the main body in this innate image. Since drawing all the insights and information about this innate image from the system gift bag, Liang Yue has deeply understood the mystery of it, and at this time, the technique he is using, called parasitic embryo seed, is a pilot work summarized and developed based on the wood characteristics, thump thump, with the appearance of the lightning firewood image, the seed that had already merged into the body of the Ten Tails, which was originally only used to disrupt the chakra operation mode. Also changed, a powerful attraction suddenly emanated from inside the seed. In an instant, this seed was like a small black hole, quickly absorbing the surrounding chakra, and the range of this attraction almost covers the entire chakra area disturbed by the fetal rhythm. Then, just half a breath later, only a soft crack sound was heard, and several cracks appeared on the surface of the seed. A dark green root protruded from it. Immediately afterwards, the roots began to grow forks at the other end of the seed, a chubby, tender bud also emerged from the soil, only to see that the leaves began to split. The branches and stems began to grow wildly, vying for each other, piece by piece. Strip by strip, it looked like it was ejected out of thin air. In the blink of an eye, it had grown to the same size as the lightning firewood behind Liang Yue, and at this time, the nutrients consumed by the growth of this small tree are the massive chakra in the body of the Ten Tails, AWW. At this moment, the Ten Tails, as the subject of the technique, seemed to have just woken up with a wide opening of its giant mouth. A roar full of anger instantly resounded through the heavens and the earth. The sound was extremely fierce, sharp and piercing, as if it came from the abyss hell. The scattered energy even blew away the thick dust and fog that originally shrouded the surroundings in an instant. Immediately afterwards, the Ten Tails shook all over, and raised its originally prostrate arms. Subconsciously, it stood up completely, as if wanting to throw Liang Yue, and the small tree that had become increasingly larger like blowing bubbles, off its body. It looked like it had been infested with insects, but soon, the Ten Tails realized that its idea was too naive, so it quickly drove the wildly swaying tail behind it, like a giant whip swung round, and hit the position where Liang Yue was. Chapter 396, Maggot on the Tarsal Bone. Scrack, boom, facing the Ten Tails' not so surprising, and somewhat belated, counterattack, Liang Yue was naturally prepared with a thought. The small tree in front of him, already swollen to more than 10 meters tall, instantly released a large amount of lightning and fire, just like the innate imagery of thunder, fire, and wood. After the parasitic fetus seed took root and sprouted, besides following the species' instinct of wood and possessing the ability to absorb and convert energy, it also had the innate characteristic of converting its own energy into thunder and fire. Even more outrageous was that the energy absorbed by the parasitic fetus seed technique ultimately originated from the Ten Tails itself. It could truly be said, taking from it, and using it against it. As a result, for a time, the power of thunder and fire in the field surged everywhere as if it were free. Lightning flashed, flames soared, and the two mixed together, transforming into a swift thunder-fire whirlwind. Actively, the incoming giant tails that were coming from above, according to the current saying in this Naruto world, the power born from the fusion of thunder and fire should be called blaze release. In the later stages of the Naruto storyline, Sasuke seemed to have mastered this aggregated energy change. As for its power, it was just so-so, at least, in the orthodox plot. There wasn't much description. Liang Yue felt that this brevity in coverage and description was actually a bit casual. The potential of the blaze release attribute itself was still worth exploring. However, he didn't have time to delve into anything at this moment. With a muffled sound of bang, in the end, the incoming tails were bounced away by the continuous output of blaze release from the small tree. However, facing Liang Yue, this bad seed clinging to its body and sucking blood, the Ten Tails naturally wouldn't willingly submit. As a result, the Ten Tails entered a state of berserk fury. Its 10 tails lashed out repeatedly, its pair of claws scratched non-stop, it rolled over and lay on its side like a mangy dog, pressing its back against the ground and rubbing vigorously. If its body structure allowed it, the 10 tails would probably have turned around and launched a few tailed beast balls at him. These seemingly inconspicuous attacks, amplified by the 10 tails' massive body, produced a destructive force that was truly shocking. In addition, there was the ear-piercing, sharp roar of the beast that hardly stopped for a moment. For a time, the wind raged, the earth shattered, the mountains shifted, and the rivers flowed backward, under the wind pressure generated by the overflowing berserk energy. Even the surrounding space seemed to distort. At this moment, the allied shinobi forces in the distance appeared exceptionally small in the face of this disaster-level change. A slight carelessness could lead to death and obliteration. Seeing this, the cage of each village, In order to avoid unnecessary casualties, simultaneously ordered everyone around them to quickly evacuate on the other side. Little King Kong and Madara, who had been fighting endlessly but unable to overcome each other in the short term, had also temporarily stopped fighting. To be precise, it was actually Madara who chose to retreat proactively. As for Little King Kong, because of the special spiritual contract connection with Liang Yue, he knew that although the person seemed passive at this time, secretly, nothing was happening to him. In comparison, the parasitic fetus seed technique was an even more rogue trick that made him stronger when his opponent was stronger. Rooted in the Ten-Tails body like a maggot attached to bone, the external branches, leaves, and other things were just appearances after absorbing the Ten-Tails chakra. The seed inside was the true body. The Ten-Tails' mindless moves such as scratching, tearing, and rubbing randomly on the ground, although seemingly fierce, couldn't harm its essence at all. In addition, the energy needed for the parasitic fetus seed to grow and develop all came from the Ten-Tails itself. So theoretically, these tree vines and branches were actually a part of the Ten-Tails in terms of strength and toughness. It was naturally not inferior, unless the Ten-Tails could suddenly use some powerful technique that Liang Yue didn't know about. Otherwise, based on this thing's performance in the original plot, it was simply not enough to pose a major threat to his plan. If we look at the energy level, this Ten-Tails is indeed very unusual. Whether it's the amount or quality of energy, it's not something I can currently match. Unfortunately, this guy's operating method is still too primitive, like a mad dog, fierce, barbaric, and violent. Although it doesn't lack instinctive intelligence, perhaps it's precisely because its foundation is too good that it seems reluctant to study some subtle energy operations. Truly, a waste of so many years on my side. I have the advantage in subtle operations and diverse means of dealing with the enemy, although I'm not as strong as the opponent in terms of energy, and the quantity is even more severely unbalanced. But fortunately, I still have a Byakugan. The spiritual power in Tensigan mode can barely compete with the Ten-Tails, used to maintain the consumption of the parasitic fetus seed technique. As for the time, a fully stocked backup shadow clone can probably last for about a minute or so. So calculating, my Tensigan mode can probably last for 7 or 8 minutes. Thinking of this, Liang Yue couldn't help but go over the previous plan in his mind again, his gaze looking at the seed inside the Ten-Tails facing the Ten-Tails outside, which was a veritable shrew-style mad dog combat mode. Liang Yue was calm and composed, not affected in any way at this moment. Dense vines all around were firmly fixing him in the depressed area of the Ten-Tails body surface. To be precise, it was the dead corner area at the base of the spiral hump on the back of the Ten-Tails and the small tree that was originally sprouted by the parasitic fetus seed, under Liang Yue's control, had transformed from a woody plant into a vine plant. The originally upright branches had now turned into countless soft and tough vines like a tangled ball of yarn. It tightly wrapped around the Ten-Tails' massive body. In the eyes of the surrounding onlookers, this originally fierce and terrifying Ten-Tails now seemed to have become a naughty kid, unable to sort it out, unable to break free. The more it struggled, the tighter it would be wrapped. Moreover, if they observed carefully enough, they would find that the Ten-Tails seemed to be shrinking. This change in size was not obvious. After all, the original body size of the Ten-Tails had already exceeded the visual assessment range of most ninjas, so it was naturally difficult to detect even if it increased or decreased slightly. But this trend was indeed happening silently. Needless to say, the reason why the Ten-Tails showed this change was naturally because of the effect of the parasitic fetus seed. After all, the seed that was planted into the Ten-Tails body originally had the ability to absorb and convert chakra, and besides using the converted energy to sprout more tree vines for self-protection. A considerable portion of it would be stored by Liang Yue for other uses. Chapter 397 Harvest Time. And so, while maintaining the number of vines around him and wielding the power of thunder and fire to wear down the Ten-Tails' strength, Liang Yue secretly conserved a portion of his chakra. The two sides were locked in a stalemate for about 5 minutes when the situation outside unexpectedly took a turn. Bang bang bang, accompanied by a series of earth and stone explosions. The Ten-Tails beneath him suddenly fell silent. At this moment, through the observation of his Tensigan, Liang Yue knew that the powerful reinforcements Orochimaru had invited had arrived. Needless to say, the arrivals were the first, second, and fourth Hokage of Konoha. Similarly, perhaps due to the illusory inertia of the world's plot, the third Hokage, who was originally stationed in Konoha village, had also arrived at the scene. At this moment, the Ten-Tails' movements had been restricted by the first Hokage's Myojin gate. Each of its Ten-Tails, 2 arms, and even its quasi-neck were pinned down by a Japanese-style Shinto gate. Have to say, although Liang Yue didn't care much for Hoshirama Senju's sealing technique due to personal preferences, the effect of this ninjutsu was genuinely impressive. Through the observation of his Tensigen, Liang Yue discovered that after being fitted with these Myojin gate shackles, the vitality of the chakra within the Ten Tails body seemed to have been greatly suppressed. Moreover, with the Myojin gate's locations as nodes, it was divided into more than 10 parts, and the communication between them was temporarily severed. This makes my actions easier. I wonder if this sealing technique will retain its power after leaving the ninja world. If it isn't weakened too much, I might consider learning it later. After observing the changes in the Ten Tails, Liang Yue would naturally not be polite with it at this time, and immediately urged the parasitic embryo to speed up the absorption of chakra. The reason why he still hadn't learned ninjutsu like Myojin Gate, even though the third Hokage had opened up all of Konoha's secret techniques to Liang Yue, was because of the divine tree, that is, the 10 tails that was currently being absorbed and turned into nourishment by him. After evolving into its ultimate form, the 10 tails would evolve into the divine tree. The 10 tails itself is a collection of chakra. The reason why chakra exists in the current ninja world is because the Otsutsuki clan planted it on the planet where the ninja world is located. The purpose is to come and harvest the chakra fruit after the divine tree matures. From this perspective, the current 10 tails, and even its ultimate form, the divine tree, is actually a special type of natural treasure, precious and rare. It can not only produce chakra fruit but also continuously transform the ecology of the place where it is located, creating a special energy environment of chakra, and the range it can transform and affect is on a planetary scale. This ability is truly moving. However, unfortunately, Liang Yue is not interested in chakra as an energy because he holds the vast system of cultivation in his hands and has already begun to delve into it. Perhaps in the distant universe, on some unknown planet, there is a cultivation system based on chakra as the basic energy, which is also powerful and mysterious. But this has little to do with Liang Yue after all. With only a dozen years of experience, he believes that he is not yet strong enough to travel freely across the universe. Even if he had this ability, he still wouldn't have the specific spatial coordinates of the other party. Moreover, compared to the colorful Naruto plot in front of him, Liang Yue is unwilling to waste his time on a lonely cosmic journey. Back to the topic. In short, the divine tree is the basis for the existence of chakra, and the nourishment it needs in the process of manufacturing chakra may be the original natural energy on this planet, or the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. After all, although the divine tree is very magical, it is probably not at the level where it can generate specific energy out of thin air. Consumption is naturally inevitable in the current Naruto world. Wood-style chakra seems to have occupied a special position since the birth of the ninja lineage. In addition to being powerful and having extra restraint abilities against tailed beasts, it also seems to be a unique power attribute of the Otsutsuki clan. The reason for this is probably inseparable from the divine tree itself and the deliberate actions of the Otsutsuki clan. However, Liang Yue does not intend to bring the divine tree back to his territory. After all, he doesn't have the idea of continuing to walk down this cultivation path. Therefore, after leaving the ninja world and without the blessing of the divine tree, whether wood-style ninjutsu can retain its original special power will undoubtedly be marked with a big question mark. Almost right after a wanton, unrestrained whale-like absorption, reaching a certain limit, Liang Yue took out the parasitic embryo from the Ten Tails body in a timely manner. At this moment, looking at the cyan and red fruit floating between his palms, some apprehension and uncertainty arose in his heart compared to the bright red chakra fruit swallowed by Momoshiki Otsutsuki and others in the original Naruto plot. The one in front of him is undoubtedly different. Looking at the appearance alone, this thing looks more like a winter peach. It is full in shape, cyan in color, and only a small area on the tip of the peach presents a tender pink color. In addition, the fruit in front of him is not an essence condensed after concentrating chakra. In fact, after absorbing chakra, Liang Yue added another process during the condensation process that is using the natural transformation ability of thunder, fire, and wood to transform chakra into natural energy, or rather, it is a substance closest to natural energy that can be safely absorbed by him without worrying about side effects. However, chakra and natural energy are different. After all, the latter is the original energy that originally existed between heaven and earth, while the former is an artificially synthesized thing. And it also incorporates a part of the synthesizer's mental power. The concentrated energy fruit in front of you, the cyan part, is the essence condensed by natural energy, and the pink area is the aggregation of those mental powers. So, whose mental power is this after all? 10 Tails, or Kaguya Otsutsuki, in the layers of tree vines. Liang Yue looked at the tempting palm-sized fruit in his hand and licked his lips subconsciously. There is no doubt that the reason why he absorbed the 10 tails power to condense such a fruit is ultimately for eating. You must know that he is now practicing the method of cultivation, and this technique itself is the original version from the mortal world. According to the logic of that plane, it is undoubtedly quite difficult for a cultivator to successfully advance to the foundation establishment stage without the help of a foundation establishment pill. The native cultivators of the mortal world are still like this, so it is naturally even more difficult for practitioners like Liang Yue, who have only obtained a basic evergreen art technique and lack the edification of a comprehensive educational environment. Therefore, Liang Yue knew from the beginning that if he wanted to advance to foundation establishment, he must obtain a spiritual elixir rich in a large amount of energy substances. Searching the entire Naruto plot, the chakra fruit is undoubtedly the closest thing to a foundation establishment pill. Chapter 398 Endogenous Recycling. Eat it. It seems there's nothing to hesitate about looking at this treasure of heaven and earth in his palm, which he had concocted haphazardly. To be honest, Liang Yue felt a bit uneasy in his heart. After all, the so-called parasitic fetus technique he had developed was still his first time applying it in practice. Before this, although Liang Yue had already prepared detailed ideas and plans, and the foundation of the technique had long been formed, due to the scarcity of experimental subjects, the actual effect had always been in the stage of fantasy and speculation. However, now that the time had come, Liang Yue seemed to have no way out. If he missed this opportunity, the 10 tails would inevitably be sealed again, and wanting to see the light of day again would probably be a distant dream. After hesitating for a moment, Liang Yue hardened his heart, frowned slightly, and stared at the fruit in front of him. He stretched out his index finger and gently swiped it across the top, immediately cutting off the pink part of the peach tip. After all, this was a major event related to foundation building, and this thing was a massive essence containing unknown mental power, so Liang Yue naturally wouldn't be greedy for small gains in such a matter. After putting the pink flesh into his storage backpack, a rolling stream of energy immediately emerged from the damaged fruit. Subconsciously, he brought it closer to sniff along with a refreshing fragrance. Liang Yue felt that his whole person suddenly became clear at this moment. He felt refreshed and his thoughts flowed freely. A warm current entered through his nostrils, and in the blink of an eye, it spread along his respiratory tract to his whole body. Every cell seemed to be cheering at this moment. That feeling was truly intoxicating. It's working. After receiving feedback from his body, Liang Yue immediately widened his eyes, revealing a strong look of surprise in his eyes. Next, he didn't hesitate at all and immediately stuffed the fruit in his hand into his mouth. He puffed out his cheeks and chewed hard. Huh? There's even a pit? After chewing a few times, Liang Yue, who was almost stunned by the sweet beauty of the fruit, suddenly felt a hardness between his teeth, and a sense of surprise and astonishment immediately rose in his heart. However, at this time, he didn't have the time to carefully distinguish anything with a thought. He put it into his storage backpack, and then began to concentrate on guiding the majestic energy in his body, and began to quickly transport and transform it. The energy contained in this fruit greatly exceeded Liang Yue's expectations. It seemed that every bit of fruit pulp contained an explosive energy, full of vitality, seemingly endless, constantly washing his body. Internal organs, muscles, bones, skin, and even hair were being washed and filled by this energy again and again. As time passed, Liang Yue's body seemed to be undergoing some kind of transformation, and he hardly felt any resistance. Together with his spiritual power and his Danshan, he easily broke through the original barrier in front of him and launched a firm impact towards another level, compared to the few types of pure treasures of heaven and earth that Liang Yue had consumed before, such as the earth spirit milk and spirit level sweet potato. Although the man-made spirit fruit in the shape of a winter peach in front of him did not have the natural charm of the former, each with its own strengths, it was the most abundant spiritual object in terms of energy that Liang Yue had used so far. If those naturally occurring spiritual essences are rare natural creations, the masterpieces of nature, then the spirit fruit in front of him, transformed from a massive amount of chakra, is a disguised man-made elixir. Its nutritional content is naturally not as rich and diverse as those natural spiritual objects, and its structure is not as balanced, but its advantage lies in its sufficient function and abundant energy. For Liang Yue, who is now at the great perfection of the 13th level of key training, it is the best thing for him to use to impact a higher realm and achieve the ultimate leap. This may be the legendary case of a mistake leading to a right result. Right, after all, this fruit is basically made of chakra, A special kind of energy, so its energy composition is relatively simple and cannot be compared with real treasures of heaven and earth. But if you don't consider other things and just use it to break through the original bottleneck and open up the key points of the cultivation realm, it is already completely sufficient from this point of view. This man-made fruit and the real foundation establishment pill are really similar and indistinguishable. Something seems wrong. After a long while, when Liang Yue gradually woke up from the scouring of the medicinal power of the spirit fruit and his divine sense reached the inside of his Danshan, he was immediately shocked by the changes in front of him. He saw that at this moment, the power of true essence, which was originally expected to be in a simple liquid form, had unknowingly formed a vivid miniature tree. That was the innate image of thunder and firewood that Liang Yue had previously obtained from the system. Carefully pondering, every branch, every leaf, and even the arrangement of the veins on the small tree were so clearly visible after further in-depth experience. Liang Yue discovered that the entire thunder and firewood small tree was composed of liquid true essence. It was crystal clear, with restrained brilliance, and self-contained. It was really like a real tree. Following its existing operating mode, it was like an extra, self-operating internal circulation system in the Danshan, drawing spiritual power and true essence from the Danshan as nourishment from the roots, transporting it through the trunk and stem pipes to all parts of the tree, and finally completing the end of the entire internal circulation by the leaves. It breathed out, incessantly, strands of pure true essence spiritual power, while nourishing the main small tree. It was actually still gestating a powerful life force. Originally, the evergreen art that Liang Yue cultivated was a wood attribute cultivation method, and the spiritual power converted from it was originally known for its physiotherapy and toughness. But the essence power born from the thunder and firewood in his body at this time was probably 100 times stronger than the former. Liang Yue even had a feeling that as long as the divine soul was not scattered, a drop of such essence could achieve the effect of bringing the dead back to life. This is somewhat comparable to things like healing art, HP potions, and 10,000-year snow cream. In addition, inside this small tree, Liang Yue also sensed a massive amount of true essence power of thunder and fire attributes. However, regarding this point, after he sensed the existence of this small tree in his Danshan, he had already expected it in this way. The pure wood-type spiritual power that Liang Yue had originally obtained through practicing the evergreen art officially branched out into two other branches. The application of the two attributes of thunder and fire no longer needed to be performed through the innate image of thunder and firewood. After this small tree model entered his Danshan, the energy of the three attributes could be moved at will, making it much easier than before, saving a whole set of conversion procedures. This will undoubtedly allow Liang Yue's strength to be significantly improved. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 399. I have this bug too. This is foundation establishment stage. Is it a natural progression, with my accumulated power finally reaching the required level? Or is it simply that with my aptitude, there are no major bottlenecks to begin with? Whatever. Anyway, I've already broken through. Now, the thing I need to worry about is a foundation establishment stage cultivation method, as it seems I can only pin my hopes on the system's lottery, or the next world. This is a bit difficult. Does this mean that for the remaining years in the Naruto world, I can only stagnate in place? Or should I first identify and fill in the gaps, and make up for my own shortcomings? As for creating my own cultivation method, if I remember correctly, after this world's training is complete, I will receive a chance to merge spiritual power and martial arts true energy into one. This will surely be a great opportunity for me. Before that, if I simply use spiritual power as a blueprint to create a follow-up cultivation method, there will inevitably be omissions. To be on the safe side, it's best not to mess around for the time being. However, the preliminary plan and deduction of the cultivation method can be put on the agenda, not to mention the specific circulation route. Even just a spark of inspiration or an idea would be good. Also, Liang Yue identity, martial arts practitioner, innate realm martial artist, immortal cultivation practitioner, foundation establishment cultivator, level 7 professional, wind phantom dragon panel, inner force. 157,600, sealed, magic power. 42,192.5, sealed, 387,150.9, available, strength, 427, sealed, plus 351, 276 plus 351, available, agility, 455, sealed, plus 384, 276 plus 384, available, constitution. 431, sealed, plus 490, 276 plus 490, available, spirit. 951, sealed, plus 412, 276 plus 412, available, bloodline, human, sealed, Otsutsuki Tensegan talents, vigorous spirit, affinity, flame resistance, acquired by bathing in dragon blood, lightning firewood, yin-yang release, gravity manipulation ability, hair manipulation skills, language mastery, ricochet, advanced gunmanship, basic swordsmanship, observation, magic glyphs, Erhu mastery, sweep, cleave, elemental mysteries, dual swords mastery, small fireball, large fireball, lightning spell, summon divine beast cultivation methods, anti-joint grappling, innate purple key shield, primal chaos art, Hangshan swordsmanship chaotic red flower rain hidden weapon, fireball technique, wind control art, thunder palm, golden light charm, object control evergreen art, multiple shadow clone technique, flying thunder god technique, 8 gates, spirit arrow technique. After completing the breakthrough, Liang Yue clearly felt that he was very different from before. First of all, under the new realm, in addition to the spiritual power in his Danshin, both in terms of quality and quantity, completed an exponential increase. His body has also been greatly strengthened, and this strengthening is divided into two parts. First, it is the enhancement brought about by the normal energy baptism and marrow cleansing in the new realm. Second, it is the part that has grown from the further release of the power of the bloodline. As the strongest clan in the Naruto world, the Otsutsuki's bloodline is indeed extraordinary, even though what Liang Yue has accumulated in his body is not their clan's root energy chakra, but is supplied by spiritual power. It still has extraordinary effects and does not discount. In the original plot, the Uchiha clan is a clear example. Just like Sasuke originally, Sasuke was just an ordinary genius, not even the best. Even compared to Rock Lee, he was still slightly inferior. However, the Sharingan is a real bug. As long as the spirit is stimulated, adding more commas to the eyes will bring great enhancement to the individual of this clan. Moreover, it is not only the abilities related to pupil power, such as insight, dynamic vision, and copy-paste, that will be enhanced, but even the physical fitness of the promoted will also undergo a major transformation. This is a bit too much, especially in the later stages. The growth rate will become larger and larger. Think about Madara. He used most of his life to accumulate experience and effort in order to evolve the Rinnegan, and he was lucky enough to succeed by gnawing on a piece of Oshirima's flesh. Because of the promotion process, Madara spent too many years and time. Under the circumstances, he had to complete the plan to revive and indirectly pursue the ideal in his heart through careful planning. At this moment, the Madara outside has not yet been able to complete the resurrection. Back to the topic. At this time, Liang Yue is naturally not qualified to despise and mock the Otsutsuki clan's promotion system, which can be called a bug because, now he is already a member of it. In addition to these excessive enhancements in physical attributes, Liang Yue also automatically mastered the complete version of the yin-yang release operation principle and the ability to manipulate gravity through some mysterious genetic information similar to inherited memory. Originally, he could only force himself into Tensegan mode in a short time by consuming an excessive amount of spiritual power, and then indirectly use these two powers. Now, he has achieved it in one fell swoop and instantly completed the mastery. This sudden gift is simply too cool. Hey, Chunkyu, are you alright? Just as Liang Yue was sitting under the cover of layers of tree vines, checking the changes after he was promoted to the Foundation Establishment realm, a faint cry suddenly came from the outside. Liang Yue was stunned when he heard the sound, and then he returned from the joy of breaking through the realm before forget it. The things outside don't seem to be over yet. Let's solve the tale of the plot first. Thinking of this, Liang Yue couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth, and a bit of eagerness arose in his heart. He couldn't help but want to practice his brand new combat power. With a thought, the originally thick and tough tree vines in front of him immediately split to both sides in his sight. The fourth Hokage of Konoha had already joined forces to set up the 4 red yang formation at the 4 points around the 10 tails. A square of red light is raising its head to the sky, covering the 10 tails high in the sky. Of course, at this time, the 10 tails, because of the parasitic fetus before, has been absorbed a lot of chakra, and its size is a whole circle smaller than before. However, as the collection of all chakras on this planet, it is only a matter of time to restore it to its original state. In addition, also because of the problem of size reduction, The Mingjin gate set up by the first generation seems to be a bit unable to suppress it at this time. A group of elites in the ninja world outside, led by Naruto and Sasuke, are launching an attack on the Ten Tails. The Ten Tails also split into a bunch of seemingly non-wooden clones, just like in the original book, and fought with the allied forces on the other side of the battlefield. Tsunade and the other 5 shadows, plus Itachi and Zyojin gang, once again formed a confrontation with Madara. Chapter 400 An Unexpected Disaster. Chunchu, are you alright over there? Almost the instant Liang Yue emerged from the thick tangle of trees, he was spotted by Naruto, who was going berserk in the monster horde below. He shouted from afar, I'm fine, you guys Just then, as Liang Yue began to reply, a strange sense of crisis suddenly welled up in his heart for no reason. Moreover, as the one experiencing it, Liang Yue could clearly feel that the source of this crisis was not from the Ten Tails below, which had noticed his appearance and was angrily lashing out at him with its tail again. It was a strange hostility, seemingly without a trace, faint and elusive, yet as if it came from all directions, omnipresent, making people feel suppressed and uneasy. Crack crack, rumble rumble rumble. The next moment, a faint buzzing sound suddenly came from the void layer upon layer, shaking the heart. Immediately following, Liang Yue felt a faint tingling in the center of his head, which then spread to his entire body. Hastily looking up, he saw that the sky, which had been completely cleared by the Ten Tails' oppressive aura, was now beginning to surge with wind and clouds. Large patches of dark clouds began to gather, as if emerging from nowhere, extremely fast, filling the entire sky in just a few breaths, and with his location as the origin, they began to slowly rotate. Streaks and paths of lightning began to be born from the surrounding clouds, converging towards the center of the vortex. Looking at this astonishing celestial phenomenon, a sense of deja vu, both familiar and strange, surged into his heart. This freaking is a heavenly tribulation. I'm about to undergo tribulation. Immediately following, he clenched his 5 fingers, and the black orbs quickly gathered together, instantly combining into one large orb. In a flash, after a rapid transformation, it finally turned into a black greatsword with a blade tens of meters long. Just like that, it floated lightly behind Liang Yue, facing the 10 huge tails that were approaching aggressively. Like a rounded whip, the greatsword instantly turned into a black shadow with a speed completely opposite to its size. Like lightning, it quickly slashed forward, shoo aww, accompanied by the 10 tails' huge, somewhat distorted scream. 10 tails of varying lengths flew in all directions, eventually crashing to the ground, splashing large amounts of dust. To all retreat for now, there will soon be a calamity here, and it's not from the 10 tails. After cutting off the 10 tails' tails, Liang Yue did not continue to attack, but immediately transmitted a spiritual message to the entire battlefield, conveying the vague signal to the allied shinobi forces present. He himself crossed his arms and looked solemnly at the unusually thick tribulation clouds in the sky at this time. The layers of flashing thunder clouds were like stacked cotton, and even with his Tensegen's perspective ability, coupled with the blessing of the Wind Dragon's Eye of Truth, he was beginning to see things a little blurry. In the midst of the violent rumbling, a dazzling piece of lightning had already been swirling and gathering in the center of the tribulation clouds. The very bottom of the tribulation clouds was almost touching the apex of the 4 red yang formation. Unknowingly, the atmosphere in the field had become extremely oppressive, and a suffocating sense of urgency permeated the air. A vast pressure was directly oppressing from the sky. Even the 10 tails, which had its tails cut off by Liang Yue, seemed to have sensed something was wrong. After howling seemingly instinctively, it was on all fours, prostrating itself on the ground. Its 10 half-length tails were tightly clamped between its legs, and its whole body began to tremble. Even the wood-release clones that were originally used to block the allied shinobi forces had been withdrawn by the 10 tails. Obviously, facing the heavenly tribulation that was pressing down on Liang Yue at this time, the 10 tails, which shared the same space with him, also began to feel nervous and fearful. However, this was also reasonable after all. According to the settings in the original plot, although the existence of the 10 tails is very transcendent, if it is classified into specific levels and realms, it is at most a 6 paths level. Moreover, judging from the situation that the other party could be repeatedly beaten by the 6 paths sage, 6 paths Naruto, Sasuke, and others, the 10 tails is probably a bottom-ranked unit in the 6 paths level. And if we talk about realm alone, the so-called 6 paths level is almost no different from Liang Yue's current foundation establishment stage after completing his advancement. This is Liang Yue's own personal feeling at this moment. Therefore, the heavenly tribulation that can be arranged by the heavenly Dao for Liang Yue also has the same threat to the 10 tails below. In addition, The heavenly tribulation seems to have a fatal characteristic, that is involvement. That is, when a cultivator is undergoing tribulation, if there are other people within a certain range nearby, and they do not leave in time when the heavenly tribulation begins, they will also be judged as the person undergoing tribulation at that time. The second heavenly tribulation will descend. The intensity will depend on the strength of the second person himself. If the two people are close enough, the heavenly tribulation will even merge into one, producing a superimposed power effect. The current Liang Yue and Ten Tails obviously meet this condition. What is the reason that causes heavenly tribulation? Logically speaking, the rules between different worlds are not the same. The thunder tribulation of the cultivation world should not appear in the world of ninjas. Could it be that I am special and enjoy a share of the heavenly Dao's care, or is it because of the existence of the system, which additionally comes with a complete version of the advanced gift? That's not right. Did there not be a thunder tribulation when I advanced to Xianshan in the Yishan world before? It can't be said that there is also a cultivation system in this ninja plane? Just as Liang Yue was resisting the pressure of the heavenly tribulation and constantly pondering in his heart on the surrounding battlefield, the ninjas who were originally fighting fiercely mostly followed his advice and withdrew from the battlefield. It's not that someone has already established a strong prestige in the allied forces at this time and can directly order the ninjas of various villages. In fact, the heavenly tribulation above has gradually taken shape, and the closer you get to Liang Yue and the Ten Tails, the more intense the invisible sense of impending disaster becomes. People's instincts are to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. So naturally no one will rush forward to die unless necessary. However, things are never absolute. The world is so big. There will always be a few people whose brains are not normal, knowing there is danger, but still insisting on coming to join in the fun, whether it's generous and tragic songs, calm and optimistic, or deep friendship and shared responsibility. In short, the emergence of this situation also shows that Liang Yue has indeed formed some good friendships in the ninja world in the past few years. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.